You stand in the forum as the sun bleeds orange across cracked marble, and you wonder when everything started feeling so empty. It's 476 CE, late September, and you've come to the evening market like you always do, like your father did, like his father did before him. The routine should comfort you, but tonight it doesn't. The vegetable seller who's occupied the same corner for 20 years isn't there. Her spot sits vacant. Weeds pushing through the paving stones, no one bothers to repair anymore. You remember when there were slaves who did that? Crews of them, keeping Rome pristine. Now the stones crack and buckle and people just walk around them. The air smells of wood smoke and overripe fruit, and underneath it all, something stale. Decay, maybe. Or just absence. The forum used to roar with life merchants hawking silk from the east. Poets declaring verses, politicians gathering crowds, the thunder of 1,000 conversations in a dozen languages. Now maybe 30 people drift between the stalls, their voices low, almost apologetic. The great bronze statue of Marcus Aurelius still stands in the center, but someone's stolen the copper fixtures from its base. Nobody's replaced them. Nobody seems to notice anymore, or if they do, they don't mention it. You approach the baker's stall, old Gaius, who makes bread the way his grandfather taught him, the good Roman way, with wheat from Sicily. Except the wheat doesn't come from Sicily anymore, hasn't for years. Vandals control the grain ships now, and Gaius makes his loaves with whatever local farmers bring, when they bring anything at all. The bread is darker, heavier, nothing like you remember from childhood. But Gaius still smiles, still calls you citizen, still pretends everything's normal. Quiet tonight, you say, because someone should acknowledge it. Gaius shrugs, wrapping your loaf in cloth that's been mended so many times it's more thread than fabric. People stay home when they can. Safer that way. Safer. That word didn't apply to the heart of Rome. This was the eternal city, protected by Mars himself, invincible. Alaric sacked it 66 years ago, and people said that was the end, that Rome could never recover from such shame. But Rome rebuilt. Rome endured. Rome always endures. Except now you're not so sure. The legions that used to parade through these streets, where are they? The emperors who ruled the world from Palatine Hill, who even know their names anymore? The current one, some boy named Romulus, barely 16, sits in Ravenna, not Rome. The real power is Odoacer, a general, a barbarian, though nobody calls him that to his face. He wears Roman clothes, speaks Latin, and pays the soldiers. Are any of you still Roman? You walk past the old Senate house, the doors are closed. They're always closed now. The Senate still meets, technically, but they don't decide anything important. The real decisions get made by whoever controls the army, and the army's been foreign for longer than you've been alive. Goths, Vandals, Huns, men who fight for Rome but don't come from Rome. Your grandfather used to complain about it, saying an empire defended by barbarians was no empire at all. But what choice was there? Roman citizens stopped volunteering for the legions generations ago. Why die on some frozen frontier when you could live comfortably in the city? Except the city isn't comfortable anymore, and the frontiers have moved so close you can practically see them from here. A child runs past chasing a leather ball, and her laughter sounds like music, sounds like hope. Her mother calls after her in Latin mixed with Germanic words, the language already changing, already becoming something new. In the Eastern Empire, they say, in Constantinople, things are still golden and grand. The Emperor Zeno rules with power and ceremony. But here in the West, in Italy, in Rome itself, everything feels like sunset. Long shadows, cooling air. The day is ending. You think about asking someone, the baker, the mother, anyone, when did it happen? When did Rome stop being Rome? But you already know they wouldn't have an answer, because it didn't happen in a moment. No trumpet sounded. No announcement was made. Rome didn't fall like a tree crashing in a forest. It faded like light from the sky, so gradually that you only noticed when you could barely see anymore. Tonight, walking through this half-empty forum with your heavy bread and your heavy thoughts, you realize something. Maybe Rome already fell. Maybe it fell years ago, decades ago, and everyone just forgot to mention it. Or maybe, and this thought is stranger still, maybe Rome is falling right now, slowly. So slowly you're living inside the fall itself and can't see it clearly. Like watching yourself age in a mirror, you don't notice the daily changes. Only when you look back at who you were do you understand how much has transformed. The sun drops below the hills. and someone lights the oil lamps. Though there are fewer of them than there used to be, oil's expensive now. Everything's expensive now. You turn toward home, toward whatever safety your four walls provide, and you wonder if tomorrow's market will be emptier still, if more stalls will sit vacant, if more voices will fall silent. Here's what really happened, stripped of drama and myth. The Roman Empire grew too large to govern efficiently with ancient technology. No telephones, no internet, just horses and roads and handwritten messages that took weeks to arrive, if they arrived at all. The empire became expensive to defend, with thousands of miles of frontier against peoples who had nothing to lose and everything to gain from raiding or settling inside Roman borders. The economy stagnated, then contracted. Tax revenue fell. The government debased the currency, causing inflation. People stopped trusting institutions that couldn't protect them anymore. Local strongmen filled the power vacuum. Germanic generals realized they didn't need Roman emperors to legitimize their rule. They had the armies, and armies were what mattered. And through it all, regular people, people like you, if you'd been born then, just tried to survive, adapt, make sense of changes they couldn't control. Does that sound familiar? Maybe it should. Empires today face similar pressures. Overstretch, economic strain, loss of institutional trust, the sense that the center cannot hold, that things are fragmenting. Rome's fall isn't ancient history, it's a mirror, if we're brave enough to look, but we're getting ahead of us. You want to know what really happened, and to understand that, we need to go back before the fall. Back to when the cracks first appeared. Back to a time when Romans still believed their empire was eternal, even as the ground beneath them started to shift. What myth about Rome surprised you most? What story did you grow up believing that turns out to be more complicated? Share in the comments if you'd like. Sometimes it helps to name what we're letting go of before we can embrace what's true. They'd look at you confused. The Senate still meets. The churches still hold services. People still speak Latin, still trade in the Forum, still call themselves Romans. The Eastern Roman Empire still stands in Constantinople, powerful and wealthy, and will stand for another 1,000 years. So did Rome fall, or did just the western half of its government change management? There's another myth, quieter but just as persistent, that the fall was sudden moral decay, that Romans became soft, decadent, lazy, and that's why they couldn't defend themselves anymore. It's a story people love because it comes with a lesson, a warning. Stay strong, stay virtuous, or you'll fall like Rome. Except Romans in the 5th century weren't noticeably more decadent than Romans in the 1st century. If anything, they were more Christian, more austere, less inclined to the legendary excesses of Nero or Caligula. The empire didn't fall because people started enjoying themselves too much. It fell, if it fell at all, for far more mundane reasons. Economics, military overstretch, climate change affecting harvests, plague, political fragmentation, the kinds of things that don't make inspiring moral tales but are true nonetheless. What we're really talking about when we talk about Rome's fall is transformation. The Roman Empire didn't end so much as it evolved, broke apart, recombined into new forms. The Catholic Church preserved Roman administrative structures. Germanic kingdoms adopted Roman law. The Latin language fractured into French, Spanish, Italian, Portuguese, Romanian. Byzantine emperors in Constantinople called themselves Roman for 1,000 years after the fall, and nobody corrected them. When you ask when did Rome fall, you're really asking when did something stop being itself and become something else? And that's a philosophical question as much as a historical one. The story you've been told about Rome's fall is probably wrong. Not because anyone lied to you, but because the truth is so much stranger, so much slower, so much less dramatic than what makes a good story. We love our moments of catastrophe, don't we? The decisive battle, the barbarian horde, the gates crashed open. The empire collapsed in a single terrible day. But empires don't work like that. They're not buildings that stand until they fall. They're more like, well, like you, like a body aging. When did you stop being young? Can you point to the exact moment? Was it a specific birthday? A particular morning when you woke up and everything had changed? Or did it happen so gradually that you only noticed years later, looking at old photographs, wondering when those lines appeared around your eyes? Rome fell the way you age. Slowly, imperceptibly, until one day you look back and barely recognize what you were. Let's clear away some myths first, gently because they're beautiful myths and it's hard to let them go. You've probably heard that barbarians destroyed Rome. that savage tribes from the north swept down and tore apart civilization. There's some truth there, just enough to make the myth believable. But the reality is more complicated, more human, more interesting. The so-called barbarians weren't mindless destroyers. Most of them desperately wanted to be Roman. They wore Roman clothes, adopted Roman names, learned Latin, served in Roman armies. Many of them were born inside the empire, second or third generation settlers. Were they destroying Rome or trying to preserve it? Were they outsiders, or were they Romans too by that point? Then there's the idea of a single catastrophic event. Maybe you learned that Rome fell in 476 CE when the last Western emperor was deposed. That's the date in textbooks, neat and tidy. But walk the streets of Rome in 477, the year after, and ask someone if their empire has fallen. But you'll come back. You're Roman. Romans endure. That's what you tell yourself as you walk through streets that were ancient when your ancestors were young. Streets that will outlast you regardless of what empire claims them. Rome, you think, is more than emperors and legions. It's these stones beneath your feet. It's the language you speak. It's the bread you carry. It's the routine of the evening market, even when the market is dying. Maybe that's the secret. Maybe Rome isn't falling. Maybe it's just changing into something else, something you don't recognize yet, something that will still carry pieces of Rome forward into whatever comes next. Or maybe that's just what you tell yourself to sleep at night, to avoid the terrible truth that everything you've known, everything you've been, is ending. The stars come out above the 7 hills. They're the same stars that shone on Romulus and Remus, on Caesar and Augustus, on all the glory that was Rome. They'll shine on whatever comes after too. You reach your door, step inside, close out the darkening forum, and the empty streets, and the questions without answers. Tomorrow, you'll go to the market again. What else can you do? You're Roman, even if Rome itself has forgotten what that means. And perhaps that's where we are too, you and I, standing in our own twilight markets, wondering about endings and beginnings. If you enjoy calm history like these stories you can learn from while you rest, then you're welcome to like the video and subscribe. Only if it genuinely helps you. And if you feel like it, you can leave a comment telling me where you're listening from and what time it is there. Some people listen in the early hours, some at midday. It's always interesting to see where these quiet stories land. Now, let's begin. To understand how Rome really fell, how anything really ends, we need to start with the 3rd century crisis, a time when the empire nearly collapsed 200 years before that famous date in 476. We need to feel what it was like when stability first crumbled, when Romans first realized their world might not be eternal after all. But to understand how it really happened, we need to go back, way back to when the nightmare first began. The year is 251 CE, and you're standing in a wheat field on the edge of the empire, somewhere in what will one day be called France, but is now just Gaul, Roman Gaul, and you're watching smoke rise from your neighbor's farm 3 miles east. You've been watching it for an hour now. Nobody's gone to help. Nobody's going to help. You learned that lesson 2 years ago, when the Alemanni came through and burned half the valley. The legion that used to patrol this region, the one your grandfather served in, the one that kept the peace for generations, pulled out last spring. They're needed elsewhere, the magistrate said. There's always somewhere else they're needed now. Your hands shake as you grip the scythe, not from age, you're only 32, but from something deeper. Fear that's become so constant it lives in your bones. This morning you woke before dawn like always, kissed your wife, checked on your 2 daughters sleeping on their straw mattresses, and came out to harvest. The wheat is good this year, thank the gods. Golden and heavy, the kind of crop your father would have celebrated. But you don't celebrate anymore. You just try to get it cut and stored before someone. The smoke thickens, definitely a farm burning. You wonder if it's Antonius, the old veteran who lives over the eastern ridge. Or maybe Lucia's family, the ones with the vineyard. You wonder if you should go see, bring water, help salvage what's left. But your feet don't move, because what if they're still there, whoever did this? What if they see you, your farm, see that you have something worth taking? This is what the 3rd century crisis feels like. Not grand battles you hear about in stories. Not senators debating in marble forums. Just you, in a field, watching smoke, trying to decide if your neighbors' lives are worth risking your own, trying to survive in an empire that's tearing itself apart at the seams. It started in 235 CE, when Emperor Alexander Severus was murdered by his own troops. You were a child then, barely remember it. Your father explained that sometimes emperors died, But Rome went on. Rome always went on, except this time was different. The general who killed Alexander Maximinus Thrax became emperor, and he lasted 3 years before his soldiers killed him too. Then came Gordian I and Gordian II, who ruled together for 22 days before dying. Then Gordian III, just a boy really, who ruled 6 years before being murdered. Then Philip the Arab, then Decius, then Gallus, then Emilian, then Valerian. You've stopped learning their names? What's the point? By the time news reaches your farm that there's a new emperor, in the last 16 years, there have been more than 20 emperors, and those are just the ones everyone agrees were legitimate. There are other generals in Britain or Syria or Africa who declare themselves emperor, mint their own coins, raise their own armies. Civil war after civil war after civil war. Roman killing Roman while the borders crumble, and the barbarians watch and wait and learn. The wheat whispers around you in the morning breeze. It doesn't care about emperors. It grows, or it doesn't. It feeds you, or everything's become that simple now. That was brutal. You remember when tax collectors came every year, regular as seasons. They'd assess your harvest, take their portion, and you'd complain, but you'd pay because roads stayed maintained and the legions kept you safe and there was law, order, civilization. Now tax collectors come whenever they feel like it, sometimes twice a year, sometimes not for 3 years, and they take whatever they want because there's no higher authority to appeal to. Last time they came, they took half your stored grain and both your oxen, said the army needed them. For which emperor? They didn't say. They had swords. That was authority enough. Your wife, Claudia? She stopped singing. That's how you measure that. She used to sing while grinding grain, spinning wool while cooking. Songs her mother taught her. Old Roman songs about love and spring and the gods who blessed the harvest. Now she works in silence, and her eyes are always moving, always watching the road, always listening for hoofbeats. Both your daughters, 10 and 7, know to run and hide if strangers approach. You've shown them the hollow beneath the barn where they should crouch quiet as mice until you or their mother comes to get them. What kind of world makes children practice hiding from their own empire's soldiers? The smoke is spreading now. Definitely a big fire. You make a decision you're not going. May the gods forgive you, but you're not going. You turn back to your wheat, and you cut, and you try not to think about Antonius or Lucia or whoever's watching their life burn while you save your own. But here's what you don't know yet, what nobody can tell you because it hasn't happened. This crisis, this nightmare you're living through, will last for 50 years. 50 years of chaos. 50 years of emperors rising and falling like wheat under a scythe. 50 years of plague and invasion and economic collapse and your children growing up knowing nothing but fear. And when it finally ends, Rome will never be the same. The old republic turned empire, the system that lasted 500 years, will be dead. Something new will take its place, something harder, more militarized, more desperate. But you don't know that yet. Right now, you just know the smoke and the fear and the wheat that needs cutting. By midday, you've worked your way across half the field. Your back aches. Your hands are blistered. The sun beats down mercilessly and you're thinking about stopping for water when you hear horses coming fast down the valley road. Your heart stops. Your bladder loosens. Every muscle in your body screams run, hide, fight, but you just stand there frozen, watching them approach. 6 riders, armed. But as they get closer, you see they're wearing Roman military tunics, or something like them. The tunics are faded, patched, and they're carrying a strange mix of weapons. One has a proper gladius, another a Germanic longsword, another an axe. These are imperial soldiers. These are the men who defend civilization. They stop at the leader, a scarred man missing half his left ear, surveys your farm with the practiced eye of someone assessing value. Your house, your barn, your wheat, your life, all weighed and measured in seconds. Tax collection, he says. His Latin has an accent you can't place. Illyrian, maybe, or Thracian. The Empire's armies are so mixed now, so many different peoples fighting under the eagle, you can't tell anymore who's Roman and who isn't. I paid already, you say. Your voice sounds steadier than you feel. 4 months ago. To the magistrate's men, the scarred soldier smiles, but there's no humor in it. Different taxes, emperor's levy, for the campaign in Gaul, half your grain stores, and any coins you have. What campaign? What emperor? His hand moves to his sword, not threatening exactly, just reminding you it's there. Does it matter? It doesn't. You both know it doesn't. You lead them to your barn, and you watch as they load half your winter stores onto their pack horses. Claudia comes out, sees what's happening, says nothing, just stands there with her arms crossed over her chest, protecting nothing, protecting everything. The soldiers take the grain. They take the small leather purse where you keep your few silver coins. They take a bronze pot Claudia's mother gave her as a wedding gift. One of them starts toward your chickens, but the scarred leader stops him with a word. Enough, he says. Then to you, you're lucky. Other farms we visited today, we took everything. Lucky. You're lucky. You watch them ride away with half your food and all your money, and you're supposed to feel grateful because it could have been worse. And the terrible thing is, you do feel grateful because it could have been worse. They could have burned your house, raped your wife, killed you all. This is what gratitude looks like now. Relief that you're merely robbed instead of murdered. That night, you sit by the fire with your family and you ration out dinner in smaller portions than usual because the stores must last longer now. Your youngest daughter asks if the men will come back. You tell her no, knowing you're probably lying. Your oldest asks why the emperor needs so much from everyone if he's supposed to protect us. You have no answer that makes sense, so you tell her to finish her porridge and go to bed. Claudia waits until the girls are asleep, then she speaks quietly into the darkness. How much longer can we do this? I don't know. My cousin in Massilia, she says people are leaving. Going north, east, anywhere that feels safer. Abandoning. This is our land. My father's land. His father's before him. And what good is land if we starve on it, or if raiders kill us for it? You don't answer, because she's right, and you know it. All over the empire, this same conversation is happening. How long do we endure? When do we give up? When do we stop being Roman citizens and become just survivors? The months drag on. Summer fades to autumn. The smoke you saw that morning turned out to be Antonius's farm. Raiders from across the Rhine, Germanic tribesmen who struck fast and vanished before any soldiers could respond. Antonius survived, barely, but his eldest son didn't. You went to the funeral. Enough, he says. Then to you, you're lucky. Other farms we visited today, we took everything. Lucky. You're lucky. You watch them ride away with half your food and all your money, and you're supposed to feel grateful because it could have been worse. And the terrible thing is, you do feel grateful because it could have been worse. They could have burned your house, raped your wife, killed you all. This is what gratitude looks like now. Relief that you're merely robbed instead of murdered. That night, you sit by the fire with your family and you ration out dinner in smaller portions than usual because the stores must last longer now. Your youngest daughter asks if the men will come back. You tell her no, knowing you're probably lying. Your oldest asks why the emperor needs so much from everyone if he's supposed to protect us. You have no answer that makes sense, so you tell her to finish her porridge and go to bed. Claudia waits until the girls are asleep, then she speaks quietly into the darkness. How much longer can we do this? I don't know. My cousin in Massilia, she says people are leaving. Going north, east, anywhere that feels safer. Abandoning. This is our land. My father's land. His father's before him. And what good is land if we starve on it, or if raiders kill us for it? You don't answer, because she's right, and you know it. All over the empire, this same conversation is happening. How long do we endure? When do we give up? When do we stop being Roman citizens and become just survivors? The months drag on. Summer fades to autumn. The smoke you saw that morning turned out to be Antonius's farm. Raiders from across the Rhine, Germanic tribesmen who struck fast and vanished before any soldiers could respond. Antonius survived, barely, but his eldest son didn't. You went to the funeral. Stood with 12 other farmers, there used to be 40 families in this valley, and listened to a Greek priest say words over a grave. The old Roman rites are dying too, being replaced by Eastern mystery religions that promise salvation in the next life since this one offers so little. Winter comes, and it's harsh. You make your grain last through careful rationing, through going hungry some nights so your daughters can eat. You trap rabbits. You thin your flock of chickens to dangerous levels. Claudia sells her last good cloak to a traveling merchant for coins you immediately hide in 3 different places. In February, news arrives that changes nothing and everything. Emperor Decius is dead, killed fighting the Goths somewhere on the Danube frontier. The Goths, a people you'd never heard of until a few years ago, not only defeated a Roman army, but killed the emperor himself. When your grandfather was young, such a thing would have been unthinkable. Roman emperors didn't die in battle against barbarians. Rome didn't lose. But that was then. This is now. The new emperor is called Gallus. You learn his name from the magistrate who rides through in March with 6 guards. The whole imperial administration reduced to 7 men on tired horses. Gallus wants more taxes. For defense. For the military. Always for the military, even though the military hasn't defended anything in your valley for years. I don't have anything left to give, you tell him. The magistrate, a thin man whose fine toga is fraying at the edges, looks at you with something like pity. Then give service. We need men for the auxilia. Every farm must provide 1 man between 15 and 45. Your heart sinks. I'm the only man here. Then you'll serve. For how long? He shrugs. Until the crisis ends. But you're starting to understand something terrible. This isn't a crisis This isn't a storm until the clear skies return. This is the new normal. This chaos, this fear, this slow dissolution of everything that made Rome Rome, this is what life is now. You negotiate, desperately. You can't leave. Who'll work the farm? Who'll protect your family? Finally, the magistrate agrees to take payment instead. Triple what you give him everything. The last of the silver coins, your good plough, your wife's wedding jewelry, everything. He takes it with the same pitying look and rides away. That night, Claudia makes a decision. We're leaving, she says. Where would we go? I don't care. Somewhere there are still laws. Somewhere there are still real emperors and real legions and real protection. Maybe Constantinople, maybe Africa. Anywhere but here, watching everything our families built turn to ash. You want to argue? You want to insist Rome will recover? That the crisis will pass? That abandoning your land would betray everything your ancestors fought for? But looking at your daughter's hollow cheeks, at your wife's exhausted eyes, at the empty grain stores and the fields you won't be able to plant properly without a plow, you realize she's right. Rome is dying. Not in the dramatic way poets might write about someday, but in this quiet way, family by family, farm by farm, as people simply give up and walk away from the empire that can no longer protect them. Close your eyes and imagine it. Imagine being so tired, so afraid, so worn down by years of chaos that you'd abandon the only home you've ever known. Imagine looking at your children and understanding that the world you were promised, the eternal empire, the Roman peace, is a lie they'll never believe because they've never seen it. That's the 3rd century crisis. Not dates and battles and emperor names, but this feeling in your chest, this knowledge that everything is ending and nobody can stop it. And the most terrifying part? It's only just begun. Let me know if you'd like more episodes from this era. There are so many stories here, so many ordinary people living through impossible times. But for now, rest, breathe. We'll continue this journey together. Christians who refuse to sacrifice to the traditional gods are imprisoned, tortured, and executed. You process some of the arrest warrants, filing them in proper order, making sure names are spelled correctly. Just doing your job. Just keeping the machine running. Diocletian's reforms continue. More provinces are created, more soldiers are recruited, more taxes are levied. The empire becomes a perfectly organized mechanism for extracting resources from its population and converting them into military power. It works. Gods help you. It actually works. But you can't shake the feeling that something essential has been lost. That in saving Rome, Diocletian has transformed it into something that isn't quite Rome anymore. Something harder, colder, more efficient, but less human. The old empire died during the crisis. This new empire, the one you serve, is a different creature entirely. It wears Rome's name and speaks Rome's language, but its soul is foreign. For a moment, it seemed to work. The bleeding stopped. The patient stabilized. But empires are like bodies, where you can't keep stitching wounds forever. Eventually, you have to address what made them sick in the first place. And Diocletian never did that. He just made the bodies stronger, more disciplined, more controlled. The disease, though the fundamental problems of size and complexity and diversity remained, hidden beneath the surface, waiting. The whole system of the Tetrarchy depends on it. 4 emperors, 4 palaces, 4 sacred persons who rule by divine right. And it's holding. The empire is stable. For the first time in your lifetime, things are. You just wonder what's been sacrificed to achieve that stability. Evening comes. You're released from duty when the light fails even with lamps. There's only so much copying work you can do before errors creep in. You walk back to the dormitory through streets that are orderly, patrolled, and safe. Nicomedia is a proper Roman city again. Markets operate, buildings are maintained, the aqueduct works. It's everything the empire is supposed to be. And it feels like you pass a small church, barely more than a house, with a cross scratched on the door. You know there are Christians inside, worshipping their crucified God, and you know that soon soldiers will come for them. Diocletian's patience with their refusal to participate in state religion has run out. Executions. Another round of terror to enforce conformity. For a moment you consider warning them. Then you remember your survival depends on being invisible, and you keep walking. That night, lying on your narrow bed while other clerks snore around you, you think about what you're part of. Diocletian has indeed saved the empire. The crisis is over. The frontiers are secure. The economy functions. But the price is a government that controls everything, that demands everything, that tolerates no dissent or difference. The old Roman ideal, liberty, citizenship, rights seem like distant memories now. What you have instead is order, security, survival. Is that enough? You're not sure anymore. You're not sure you're allowed to even ask the question. 3 months later, the first major Christian persecution began. Churches are burned, holy books are confiscated and destroyed. Administrators who won't administer. It threatens everything Diocletian has. But you've met Christians, good people, mostly, who just want to worship their God in peace. The idea of hunting them down, killing them for their beliefs, sits heavy in your stomach. But you won't say that aloud. You've survived this long by not having opinions. The afternoon brings a different kind of chaos. A senior official from Diocletian's inner circle arrives surrounded by guards and demands immediate access to all records regarding military recruitment in the Pannonian provinces. You and 4 other clerks spend 3 hours pulling documents, cross-referencing, assembling a report. The official barely glances at it, just has his secretary take the whole stack and leaves. Hours of work, and you'll never know why he wanted it or what decision it informed. This is how power works now. Centralized, distant, mysterious. Diocletian makes decisions in his palace, surrounded by advisors you'll never meet, and those decisions ripple outward through layers of bureaucracy until they reach people like you who implement them without understanding them. It's efficient, maybe, but it's also deeply alienating. You're serving an emperor you've seen exactly once, from 100 yards away, during a ceremony you were required to attend. The old empire, for all its chaos, felt more human somehow. Emperors who walked among soldiers, who addressed crowds, who were assassinated by people they knew. Now emperors are sacred, distant, hedged about with ceremony. When you approach Diocletian, not that you ever would, you're supposed to prostrate yourself. Kiss the hem of his purple robe. He's not just a general who seized power. He's a living god, or close enough. The divinity that Romans used to grant emperors after death, Diocletian claims while alive. It works, though. That's the strange thing. People obey more readily when the emperor seems like something more than human. The government has grown bloated, massive, and you're part of that growth. Thousands of bureaucrats like you all working frantically to make Diocletian's vision function. The old empire ran on a surprisingly small administration. This new empire needs armies of clerks just to keep track of itself. At midday, you break for a meal of bread and olive oil and small beer, the same every day. You eat with 3 other clerks at a table outside, and you don't talk about work because you're sick of work, but there's nothing else to talk about. Your entire life is work. You sleep in a dormitory with 20 other. You eat meals provided by the state. Your clothing is issued by the quartermaster. You're paid, technically, but most of your salary is in kind rather than coin, because coin is still unreliable. You're a cog in a vast machine, and the machine is all there is. Did you hear about the Christians? Asks Titus, a younger clerk who still has the energy for gossip. There's going to be another purge. Diocletian declared them enemies of the state. You keep chewing your bread. Religion is dangerous territory. The old Roman gods are still official, still honored in ceremonies, but nobody really believes anymore. Too much has happened. Too many unanswered prayers during the crisis years. The Eastern mystery cults are growing. Mithras, Isis, Christ. People want salvation, certainty, something beyond this world because this world has proven so unreliable. Why now, someone asks. Titus shrugs. They refuse to sacrifice to the emperor's genius. They say their god is higher than any human authority. Diocletian can't tolerate that. If people can opt out of honoring the emperor for religious reasons, the whole system falls apart. He's right, in a way. The new system depends on absolute obedience, on everyone playing their assigned role. Soldiers who won't fight for religious reasons, tax collectors who... You've been doing this work for 3 years now, since Diocletian established his court in Nicomedia and began his great reorganization. You remember the first days, the excitement that rippled through the administrative class. Finally, an emperor who understood that the old system was broken. Finally, someone willing to make hard choices. The provinces were reorganized from 45 to over 100, making them smaller and supposedly easier to govern. The army was massively expanded and split into border troops and mobile field forces. The tax system was completely reformed with new assessments based on land productivity rather than traditional tribal obligations. Everything, all at once, transformed. And maybe it worked. Maybe Diocletian really did save the empire. The frontiers are more secure than they've been in 50 years. There haven't been any civil wars since he took power. The currency is stabilized somewhat. Trade is recovering. People aren't abandoning their farms in desperation anymore. You have to give him, but God's the cost. The empire is more militarized than ever. Maybe a third of the entire budget goes to the army now, which means taxes are crushing. You've seen the reports from the provinces, the complaints that trickle up through proper channels before being quietly filed away. Farmers can't pay. Merchants are fleeing to barbarian territories where entire towns have been abandoned because the tax burden exceeded what the population could bear. And when people can't pay taxes in coin, they pay in labor or goods or their children's service. The empire is eating itself to stay alive. Your hand cramps as you copy the price adjustments. Around you, other clerks work with the same focused exhaustion. This office never closes. There's always another edict, another revision, another imperial directive that must be copied and distributed to all 100+ provinces. You set aside your tax reconciliation and pull out the massive wax tablet containing the current version of the edict. You've memorized large sections of it by now. A pound of pork, 12 denarii, a pound of beef, 8 denarii, a soldier's boots, 100 denarii, a teacher's fee per student per month, 200 denarii, on and on, trying to freeze the entire economy in place by sheer force of will. The problem, which everyone knows but nobody says aloud, is that it doesn't work. Merchants just hide their goods or sell on the black market. Producers stop producing things that cost more to make than the government allows them to sell for. The edict makes things worse, but Diocletian keeps updating it, keeps adding items, keeps believing that if he just gets the details right, he can command prosperity into existence. This is what desperation looks like when it has absolute power. Aurelius reads out the changes. Barley, provincial grade, increases maximum from 4 denarii to 5 per measure. African olive oil first pressing decreases from 40 to 35 per amphora. Labor for road repair. He pauses, squints at the document. Labor for road repair is now to be calculated differently, depending on whether the road is military or civilian, and further subdivided by regional wage variations. Someone in the back of the office mutters something that might be a prayer or might be a curse. You all start updating your tablets. This is governing now, not grand strategy or inspiring speeches, but endless, grinding attempts to control every detail of every transaction in an empire of 60 million people. It's like trying to hold water in your hands. The harder you squeeze, the more it escapes. Your current task is reconciling tax records from 3 different provinces that all claim jurisdiction over the same district, because the borders were redrawn and nobody told the local administrators, or they were told but the message got lost, or they were told but they're pretending they weren't. This is what saving an empire looks like up close. Endless administrative confusion, competing authorities, jurisdictional disputes over villages nobody actually wants. You rub your eyes. They ache constantly now. Too many hours reading by lamplight. Too many documents in too many different hands. The empire used to have standardized forms, standardized procedures, but 50 years of chaos destroyed all that, and now you're trying to rebuild systems that broke before you were born. A runner bursts into the office, young, breathless, holding a sealed message cylinder. Your supervisor, Aurelius, a Greek who somehow managed to rise to actual importance in this new regime, takes it with practiced calm, breaks the seal, reads. His face goes carefully neutral, which means it's bad news. It's always bad news. Another price ceiling update, he announces to the room. All scribes stop current work. Priority revision to the Edict on Maximum Prices. Groans echo through the office. The Edict on Maximum Prices is Diocletian's attempt to stop inflation by simply declaring what things should cost. Wheat, this much. Wine, this much. A day's labor for a carpenter, this much. It's a list of thousands of items and services, each with a government-mandated maximum price, and it gets updated constantly because reality refuses to cooperate with imperial decrees. The year is 293 CE, and you're a clerk in Nicomedia hunched over a wax tablet in a cold administrative building, and you're drowning in paperwork that might just save the empire, or destroy it. You're not sure which yet. Your name is Marcus. Common enough that nobody remembers it, and you're 41 years old, which makes you ancient by the standards of these times. You survived the plague that came through 15 years ago. You survived 3 different imperial purges when emperors changed and administrations were cleared out. You survived by being useful, by being invisible, by keeping your head down and your records accurate, and now you're part of something unprecedented, something that Emperor Diocletian believes will fix everything that's broken. You're not convinced. The office smells of ink and damp wool, and the anxiety of 24 other clerks just like you, all frantically copying edicts, recording tax assessments, tracking troop movements across an empire that's been reorganized so thoroughly nobody's quite sure how it works anymore. Outside the narrow window, Nicomedia sprawls toward the harbor, a city that barely mattered 20 years ago but is now one of 4 imperial capitals. 4, because Diocletian decided one emperor couldn't govern the whole empire anymore. So now there are 4 of them. A senior emperor in the east, that's Diocletian himself, based here. A senior emperor in the west, Maximian, in Milan, and 2 junior emperors, Caesars they're called, one in Trier and one in Samium. The tetrarchy, they're calling it. Rule by 4. It's brilliant, theoretically. It's also a bureaucratic nightmare. You'll be dead before the next crisis comes. You're lucky that way. You'll die believing Diocletian saved Rome, never knowing that he only delayed its transformation, that the empire he built, rigid and militarized and authoritarian, couldn't adapt when new pressures came, that he'd created something that could survive him but couldn't evolve beyond him. But tonight, you don't know any of that. Tonight, you're just a clerk who's tired, who wants to believe his work matters, who wants to think that all these forms and edicts and price controls are building something permanent. Tomorrow, you'll get up and copy more documents. That's all you can do. That's all any of you can do. Keep the machine running and hope it's heading somewhere worth going. Are you still awake? If so, drop a comment. Tell me what you think about the price of the order, whether security is worth freedom. These aren't just ancient questions. They echo forward through time, asking themselves again and again, in every age, to every person who's ever wondered whether the system they serve is worth preserving. The old empire, for all its chaos, felt more human somehow. Emperors who walked among soldiers, who addressed crowds, who were assassinated by people they knew. Now emperors are sacred, distant, hedged about with ceremony. When you approach Diocletian, not that you ever would, you're supposed to prostrate yourself, kiss the hem of his purple robe. He's not just a general who seized power. He's a living god, or close enough, the divinity that Romans used to grant emperors after death. Diocletian claims while alive. It works, though. That's the strange thing. People obey more readily when the emperor seems like the whole system of the tetrarchy depends on it. 4 emperors, 4 palaces, 4 sacred persons who rule by divine right. And it's holding. The empire is stable. For the first time in your lifetime, things aren't falling apart. You just wonder what's been sacrificed to achieve that stability. Evening comes. You're released from duty when the light fails even with lamps. There's only so much copying work you can do before errors creep in. You walk back to the dormitory through streets that are orderly, patrolled, and safe. Nicomedia is a proper Roman city again. Markets operate normally. Buildings are maintained. The aqueduct works. It's everything the empire is supposed to be. And it feels like a prison. You pass a small church, barely more than a house with a cross scratched on the door. You know there are Christians inside, worshipping their crucified God, and you know that soon soldiers will come for them. Diocletian's patience with their refusal to participate in state religion has run out. There will be arrests, executions, another round of terror to enforce conformity. For a moment, you consider warning them, Then you remember your survival depends on being invisible, and you keep walking. Titus shrugs. They refuse to sacrifice to the emperor's genius. They say their god is higher than any human authority. If people can opt out of honoring the emperor for religious reasons, the whole system falls apart. He's right, in a way. The new system depends on absolute obedience, on everyone playing their assigned role. Soldiers who won't fight for religious reasons, tax collectors who won't collect, administrators who won't administer. It threatens everything Diocletian has built, but you've met Christians, good people mostly, who just want to worship their God in peace. The idea of hunting them down, killing them for their beliefs, sits heavy in your stomach. But you won't say that aloud. You've survived this long by not having opinions. The afternoon brings a senior official from Diocletian's inner circle arrives, surrounded by guards, and demands immediate access to all records regarding military recruitment in the Pannonian provinces. You and 4 other clerks spend 3 hours pulling documents, cross-referencing, assembling a report. The official barely glances at it, just has his secretary take the whole stack and leaves. Hours of work, and you'll never know why he wanted it or what decision it informed. This is how power works now. Centralized, distant, mysterious. Diocletian makes decisions in his palace, surrounded by advisors you'll never meet, and those decisions ripple outward through layers of bureaucracy until they reach people like you, who implement them without understanding them. It's efficient, maybe, but it's also deeply alienating. You're serving an emperor you've seen exactly once, from 100 yards away, during a ceremony you were required to attend. Your hand cramps as you copy the price adjustments. Around you, other clerks work with the same focused exhaustion. This office never closes. There's always another edict, another revision, another imperial directive that must be copied and distributed to all 100-plus provinces. The government has grown bloated, massive, and you're part of that growth. Thousands of bureaucrats like you, all working frantically to make Diocletian's vision function. The old empire ran on a surprisingly small administration. This new empire needs armies of clerks just to keep track of itself. At midday, you break for a meal of bread and olive oil and small beer. The same every day. You eat with 3 other clerks at a table outside, and you don't talk about work because you're sick of work, but there's nothing else to talk about. Your entire life is work. You sleep in a dormitory you eat meals provided by the state. Your clothing is issued by the quartermaster. You're paid, technically, but most of your salary is in kind rather than coin because coin is still unreliable. You're a cog in a vast machine, and the machine is all there is. Did you hear about the Christians? Asks Titus, a younger clerk who still has the energy for gossip. There's going to be another purge. Diocletian declared them enemies of the state. You keep chewing your bread. Religion is dangerous territory. The old Roman gods are still official, still honored in ceremonies, but nobody really believes anymore. Too much has happened. Too many unanswered prayers during the crisis years. The Eastern mystery cults are growing. Mithras, Isis, Christ. People want salvation, certainty, something beyond this world because this world has proven so unreliable. Why now? Someone asks. You've been doing this work for 3 years now. Since Diocletian established his court in Nicomedia and began his great reorganization. You remember the first days, the excitement that rippled through the administrative class. Finally, an emperor who understood that the old system was broken. Finally, someone willing to make hard choices. The provinces were reorganized from 45 to over 100, making them smaller and supposedly easier to govern. The army was massively expanded and split into border troops and mobile field forces. The tax system was completely reformed with new assessments based on land productivity rather than traditional tribal obligations. Everything, all at once, transformed, and maybe it worked. Maybe Diocletian really did save the empire. The frontiers are more secure than they've been in 50 years. There haven't been any civil wars since he took power. The currency has stabilized somewhat. Trade is recovering. People aren't abandoning their farms in desperation anymore. You have to give him credit for, but God's the cost. The empire is more militarized than ever, which means taxes are crushing. You've seen the reports from the provinces, the complaints that trickle up through proper channels before being quietly filed away. Farmers can't pay. Merchants are fleeing to barbarian territories where taxes are lower. Entire towns have been abandoned because the tax burden exceeded what the population could bear. And when people can't pay taxes in coin, they pay in labor or goods or their children's service. The empire is eating itself to stay alive. You set aside your tax reconciliation and pull out the massive wax tablet containing the current version of the edict. You've memorized large sections of it by now. A pound of pork, 12 denarii. A pound of beef, 8 denarii. A soldier's boots, 100 denarii. A teacher's fee per student per month, 200 denarii. On and on, trying to freeze the entire economy in place by sheer force of will. The problem, which everyone knows but nobody says aloud, is that it doesn't work. Merchants just hide their goods or sell on the black market. Producers stop producing things that cost more to make than the government allows them to sell for. The edict makes things worse, but Diocletian keeps updating it, keeps adding items, keeps believing that if he just gets the details right, he can command prosperity into existence. This is what desperation looks like when it has absolute power. Aurelius reads out the changes. Barley, provincial grade, increases maximum from 4 denarii to 5 per measure. African olive oil, first pressing, decreases from 40 to 30, 5 per amphora. Labor for road repair. He pauses, squints at the document. Labor for road repair is now to be calculated differently depending on whether the road is military or civilian, and further subdivided by regional wage variations. Someone in the back of the office mutters something that might be a prayer or might be a curse. You all start updating your tablets. This is governing now, not grand strategy or inspiring speeches, but endless grinding attempts to control every detail of every transaction in an empire of 60 million people. It's like trying to hold water in your hands. The harder you squeeze, the more it escapes. The year is 293 CE, and you're a clerk in Nicomedia, hunched over a wax tablet in a cold administrative building, and you're drowning in paperwork that might just save the empire. Or destroy it. You're not sure which yet. Your name is Marcus, common enough that nobody remembers it, and you're 41 years old, which makes you ancient by the standards of these times. You survived the plague that came through 15 years ago. You survived 3 different imperial purges when emperors changed and administrations were cleared out. You survived by being useful, by being invisible, by keeping your head down and your records accurate. And now you're part of something unprecedented, something that Emperor Diocletian believes will fix everything that's broken. You're not convinced. The office smells of ink and damp wool and the anxiety of 24 other clerks just like you, all frantically copying edicts, recording tax assessments, tracking troop movements across an empire that's been reorganized so thoroughly nobody's quite sure how it works anymore. Outside the narrow window, Nicomedia sprawls toward the harbor, a city that barely mattered 20 years ago, but is now one of 4 imperial capitals. 4, because Diocletian decided one emperor couldn't govern the whole empire anymore. So now there are 4 of them. A senior emperor in the east, that's Diocletian himself, based here. A senior emperor in the west, Maximian, in Milan. And 2 junior emperors, Caesars they're called. One in Trier and one in Sirmium. The Tetrarchy they're calling it. Rule by 4. It's brilliant, theoretically. It's also a bureaucratic nightmare. That night, lying on your narrow bed while other clerks snore around you, you think about what you're part of. Diocletian has indeed saved the empire. The crisis is over. The frontiers are secure. The economy functions. But the price is a government that controls everything, that demands everything, that tolerates no dissent or difference. The old Roman ideal, liberty, citizenship, rights, seem like distant memories now. What you have instead is order. Security. Survival. Is that enough? You're not sure anymore. You're not sure you're allowed to even ask the question. 3 months later, the first major Christian persecution began. Churches are burned, holy books are confiscated and destroyed, Christians who refuse to sacrifice to the traditional gods are imprisoned, tortured, and executed. You process some of the arrest warrants, filing them in proper order, making sure names are spelled correctly, just doing your job, just keeping the machine running. Diocletian's reforms continue. More provinces, more soldiers are recruited, more taxes are levied. The empire becomes a perfectly organized mechanism for extracting resources from its population and converting them into military power. It works. Gods help you, it actually works. But you can't shake the feeling that something essential has been lost. But in saving Rome, Diocletian has transformed it into something that isn't quite Rome anymore. Something harder, colder, more efficient but less human. The old empire died during the crisis. This new empire, the one you serve, is a different creature entirely. It wears Rome's name and speaks Rome's language, but its soul is. This is the agony of transformation. Not the grand theological debates or imperial edicts, but these families divided. Parents and children worship different gods. Marriages, the personal cost of historical change. The next day, news arrives that rocks the entire city. Constantine has issued an edict regarding the Council of Nicaea, a great gathering of bishops from across the empire to settle disputes about the nature of Christ. Is he equal to God the Father or subordinate? Is he created or eternal? These questions seem abstract, but people are passionately divided. Fights have broken out. Communities have split. Constantine wants unity, wants one clear answer that everyone will accept. He's making Christianity into another Roman institution, your father says when he hears councils, edict, enforced orthodoxy. Give it time, and it'll be just as corrupt as anything that came before. You want to argue, but you're not sure he's wrong. There's something troubling about an emperor deciding theological truth. Isn't faith supposed to be personal between the believer and... Yet here's Constantine, who was pagan himself until 13 years ago, convening bishops and telling them to reach agreement or else. The weeks pass. Summer turns to autumn. Your father's shop does poorly. He finally, reluctantly, adds some Christian items to his inventory. Crosses, simple icons. They sell immediately. He accepts the money with visible distaste, and you understand why. He's not just adapting to market demands, he's participating in the erasure of his own worldview. Every cross he sells is another admission that the future belongs to your religion, not his. In October, a messenger arrived from the governor's office. He carries an official-looking document sealed with Constantine's image. Your father breaks the seal with trembling hands, reads. His face goes pale. After dinner, you find yourself on the rooftop terrace, looking out over Antioch. The city is beautiful at night, lamps and torches creating constellations of light. Somewhere out there, temples still burn incense to Jupiter. Somewhere else, Christians gather in secret prayer. And in the palace, the local governor enforces Constantine's edicts, carefully navigating between the old establishment and the new power. Your mother joins you. She doesn't speak at first, just stands beside you looking at the city. Finally, your father is suffering. I know. He feels like he's watching his world end. Everything he believed, everything his parents taught him, it's all being declared obsolete. Wrong, even. How would you feel? You consider this. But mother, you converted. Don't you think we're right? That Christ is the truth? I do. But I also understand what we're asking people to give up. It's not just gods and rituals. It's identity, community, connection to ancestors. When your father pours wine for the household spirits, he's communing with his dead parents, honoring the chain of tradition that connects him to the founding of Rome itself. We're asking him to break that chain, to say his ancestors were wrong. Were they wrong? Your mother is quiet for a long time. I believe Christ is the truth. I believe salvation comes through, but I also believe your father is a good man who loves his family and honors the divine as he understands it. Can both things be true? I don't know. The church says no, but my heart says maybe it's more complicated. The question hangs in the air. You think about your own conversion. Did you choose Christ because you genuinely believed? Or because it was exciting, rebellious, the future? You want to say your faith is real, authentic, but doubt creeps in. How can you ever be sure? Imagine your entire world's meaning system shifting, not through conquest or force, but through this strange, slow process where the emperor declares favor and suddenly everything's different. The gods your ancestors prayed to for 1,000 years dismissed. The temples that defined city centers emptying. The festivals that structured the year fading, and in their place, something new, something Eastern, something that promises salvation but demands belief in things unseen. The gathering continues for hours. You read more scripture, you sing hymns and simple melodies, nothing like the complex temple liturgies. You share a meal together, bread and wine in memory of Christ's sacrifice. It feels meaningful. It feels like a community. But walking home as evening approaches, you feel the weight of what's being lost as well as gained. Your father is closing the shop when you return. Your mother is preparing dinner. The household slaves are lighting Everything looks normal, but you sense the fracture lines running through your family. Your parents sleep in the same bed but pray to different gods. They raise their children in the same house but teach them different truths. How long? Dinner is quiet. Your younger brother, only 10, chats about his lessons he's learning rhetoric and mathematics from a tutor. Your father asks about his progress. Normal family conversation. But then your mother suggests attending church as a family tomorrow, and your father says he has business to attend to. And the tension returns. Nobody mentions that his business is probably visiting the temple, making offerings, clinging to what he knows even as it slips away. Helena herself, a dignified woman in her 60s, welcomes you warmly. Julia, come sit. We're reading from the letters of Paul today, about faith and work. You settle onto a cushion as someone begins reading in Greek. The words wash over you, complex theological arguments about how salvation comes, whether through following law or through grace. You don't understand all of it. Nobody really does. Christians argue constantly about interpretation, about what Christ meant, about how to live this new way. But there's something compelling in the struggle, in the attempt to build a coherent system of belief from scattered letters and oral traditions. After the reading, discussion begins. An older woman named Priscilla argues that Christians should completely separate from pagan society, refuse civic positions, stop attending festivals, and create a parallel world. A younger woman, Theodora, insists that's impractical. Christians need to engage with the world, to transform it from within. The debate grows heated. Helena raises a hand. Sisters, remember, we're living in extraordinary times. For 3 centuries, Christians were persecuted. My own grandmother died in Diocletian's purges. Now the emperor himself honors Christ. We're not oppressed anymore. We're favored. That brings new responsibilities. New dangers too. What dangers, you ask? Helena looks at you with kind but serious eyes. The danger of compromise. When we were persecuted, our faith was, we believed because we chose to, knowing it might cost us everything. Now people convert because it's advantageous, because the emperor does, because it helps their careers. How do we maintain the truth of the faith when it becomes fashionable? The shop bell rings. A customer. Your father's face transforms instantly into professional welcome. A woman enters, wealthy judging by her clothing, and she's looking at the bronze pieces. Your father guides her, explains origins and prices, negotiates with practiced ease. He's good at this. His father was a merchant, his grandfather before him. 3 generations building relationships, building trust, building a business on the foundation of traditional Roman commerce. But you see what he doesn't want to admit. The woman wears a small cross pendant. When she looks at the statuette of Venus, her lip curls slightly in distaste. She buys nothing. She leaves. Your father says nothing, just returns to arranging goods that fewer people want each passing month. You excuse yourself and walk to Helena's villa on the city's north side. The streets of Antioch are busy, prosperous, and diverse. You pass Syrian merchants speaking Aramaic, Egyptian sailors, Gothic mercenaries in Roman service, Jews heading to synagogue, Greeks arguing philosophy in the colonnade. This has always been the empire's genius, absorbing difference, making room for everyone. But you wonder if that's changing too. If Constantine's favor towards Christianity means there will be winners and losers now, acceptable beliefs and dangerous ones. Helena's villa is modest by aristocratic standards, but comfortable. 20 women are already gathered in the courtyard when you arrive. Some your age, some older, even a few slaves permitted to attend. This is another thing your father doesn't understand. In Christian gatherings, slaves and freedom mix together. Women can speak, can read scripture aloud, and can participate fully. It's not perfectly equal, the world isn't ready for that. But it's different from the strict hierarchies of traditional Roman religion where your role was determined by birth and gender. Your father returns to the shopfront, and you follow. The morning sun streams through the doorway, illuminating his wares. Beautiful things, amphoras with painted scenes from mythology, bronze statuettes of gods and heroes, fine glass from Egypt. All of it depicts a world that's fading. Last week, a customer asked if he had any Christian symbols, crosses, images of Christ. Saints. Your father said no, he didn't carry such things. The customer left. He would have been a good sale. You should consider it. You say carefully. Selling Christian goods. It's what people want now. I'm a merchant, not a propagandist. These are works of art, centuries of tradition. And they're beautiful. But father, when Constantine moves the capital, if he moves the capital. When? You insist gently. Everyone knows it's coming. Constantine has been building his new city on the Bosporus for 5 years now. Constantinople, he's calling it. The city of Constantine. A new Rome for a new age. A Christian Rome. When he moves the capital to the east, to a city that never worshipped Jupiter or Mars, what does that say about Rome itself? About what we're becoming? Your father's hand still on the amphora he was adjusting. For a moment you think he might argue, then his shoulders sag slightly. It says Rome doesn't matter anymore. That 1,000 years of history, of achievement, of the gods who protected us, none of it matters if the emperor decides to start fresh somewhere else. You cross to him, touch his arm. Rome is more than a place. You taught me that. Rome is an idea, and ideas can move, can change, can grow, can betray everything they once were. I'll go, you say quietly. He finally turns to look at you. There's such sadness in his eyes. When I was young, he says, being Roman meant something clear. We honored the gods who made Rome great. We participated in civic life. We upheld traditions passed down through 1,000 years. Now I watch my own family abandon all of it. And I'm told that's progress. That's the future. You want to comfort him? You want to explain that Christ offers something the old gods never did. Personal salvation, forgiveness, hope beyond this life. But you've had this conversation before, and it always ends the same way. Him feeling betrayed. You feel guilty. The distance between you grows wider. The old ways aren't abandoned, Father. They're just changing. Changing. He laughs, but there's no humor in it. That's one word for it. Another word is dying. He's not wrong. You can feel it everywhere in Antioch. This slow transformation of what it means to be Roman. The great temple of Zeus still stands, still receiving offerings, but it's mostly old people now. The Christian basilica near the Forum, though that's packed every Sunday, packed with people your age and younger, with merchants and soldiers and even some aristocrats. The energy, the future, it's all flowing in one direction, and it all changed because of one man, Constantine, the emperor who saw a vision or claimed he did before a crucial battle 13 years ago. A cross in the sky and words, "In this sign conquer." He put the Christian symbol on his soldiers' shields. He won the battle. He won the civil war. He became sole emperor. And now the empire is quietly, steadily becoming Christian, not through persecution, but through imperial favor. The year is 325 CE, and you're sitting in your family's shop in Antioch, watching your father arrange the old household gods on their shelf for what might be the last time, and your heart is breaking for reasons you can't fully explain to him. Your name is Julia, and you're 17 years old, which means you've never known the chaos your parents talk about, the crisis that nearly destroyed everything before you were born. To you, the empire has always been stable, orderly, Christian. Well, not officially. Christian not yet, but Christian enough that when you told your father 3 years ago that you'd been baptized, that you believed in Christ, he couldn't really forbid it. Too many people believe now. Too many important people. Even the emperor himself. Your father, though, Marcus, a merchant who sells fine ceramics and bronze goods imported from across the empire, he still pours libations to Jupiter and Mercury, still burns incense to the household Laris every morning, still observes the old festivals, though fewer people join him each year. He's 53, and he's watching his entire world dissolve like morning mist, and there's nothing he can do to stop it. Julia, he says without turning from the shrine, your mother wants you to attend the widow Helena's gathering this afternoon. You know what that means. Helena is a wealthy Christian woman who hosts scripture readings and discussions at her villa. Your mother, Lucia, converted 2 years ago, later than you, but more publicly. She stopped attending the temple festivals. I started wearing simpler clothes. Gives money to the Christian poor, rather than the civic gains. Your father says nothing about it directly, but you see how his jaw tightens when she prays before meals, addressing a god he doesn't believe exists. He turns, surprised. Why? You've chosen Christ. Because they're part of our family's story. Part of Rome's story. Because someday I'll have children, and I want to be able to tell them what their grandfather believed, even if I don't believe it myself. Something in his face softens. For the next hour, he tells you stories. How Mercury protected, how the Lares guarded the household. How his father taught him the proper prayers and rituals. He speaks of a world where divinity was everywhere, in rivers and groves, in hearths and doorways, in the rhythm of seasons and the pattern of stars. A world rich with sacred presence. You listen, and you understand what's being lost. Christianity offers many things, but it also centralizes the divine. One God, one truth, one way to salvation. The old Roman world, for all its flaws, had room for many gods, many truths, many paths. There's something beautiful in that pluralism, even if you can't fully embrace it. What would you have done in their position? Would you have clung to ancestral faith or embraced the new? It's easy to judge from a distance, but living through transformation is agony. Every choice feels like betrayal of the past or the future, of parents or children, of who you were or who you might become. Constantine will die in 12 years, baptized Christian on his deathbed. The empire he transforms will continue another 1500 years in the East, always calling itself Roman, always Christian. Rome itself will endure, though diminished, its pagan temples gradually converted to churches or abandoned to ruin, and families like yours will navigate the change, somehow finding ways to love each other across the divide of belief. But tonight, none of that is certain. Tonight is just a father and daughter, separated by faith but united by blood, trying to understand each other across a widening gulf that neither created but both must cross. What is it? Your mother asks. A tax? A new tax on traditional temple revenues, to fund the building of churches. He looks up, and there's something broken in his eyes. They're going to tax the old gods out of existence, make it financially impossible to maintain traditional worship. This is how empires change beliefs. Not through sudden persecution, Constantine learned from Diocletian's failure there, but through gradual pressure. Economic incentives, social advantages, imperial favor flowing in one direction until the current becomes irresistible. Your father sits heavily. When I was young, being Roman meant honoring the gods who made Rome great. Now being Roman means abandoning them. How is that not betrayal? You sit beside him. Take his hand. Maybe being Roman is bigger than any one religion. Maybe Rome can be Christian and still be Rome. Or maybe, he says quietly, Rome as I knew it is already gone. And this new thing wearing its name is something else entirely.
He's not entirely wrong.
Constantine is building more than churches. He's building a new capital in the East. He's restructuring the government. He's surrounding himself with Christian advice. He's creating an empire where Christian values, at least officially, shape policy. In some ways, it's revolutionary. In others, it's just the same old Roman pattern. The emperor's personal beliefs become state policy. But the human cost is real. Your father isn't a villain resisting progress. He's a man watching everything familiar disappear. The gods he prayed to, the rituals that marked time, the sense that he understood how the world worked, all of it fading into irrelevance while he's still alive to witness it. That night, you find him at the household shrine. He's not praying exactly, just standing there, looking at the small statues of Jupiter and Mercury, the household lares, remnants of a dying world. Will you teach me about them? You asks. About the old gods? What did they mean to you? Your father returns the statue of Mercury to its place. Thank you, he says, for listening, for caring, even if you don't believe it. I care because I love you. That's enough. Maybe it is. Maybe love can bridge what doctrine divides. Maybe families can survive transformation if they hold tight to what matters most. Or maybe you're being naive, and the forces pulling the world apart are too strong for personal affection to resist. Time will tell. Time always does. But for now, in this moment, in this house in Antioch, a father and daughter stand together at a shrine to vanishing gods, and they're both trying, in their own ways, to honor the past while embracing whatever future comes. The empire's soul is changing. Rome is becoming something new, and all you can do is witness it, navigate it, and hope that something essential, something truly Roman, survives the transformation. The year is 378 CE, and you're standing on the walls of Adrianople watching the horizon, and you absolutely know that everything is about to change. You just don't know how bad it will be yet. Your name is Gaius, and you're a career soldier, 8 years old, which makes you ancient by military standards. You joined the legions when you were 17, fought in Persia, garrisoned in Britain, marched the length of the Danube frontier more times than you can count. Your knees ache, your shoulder, the left one, injured in a skirmish with Alemanni raiders 8 years ago, hurts when it rains. You've got scars on your ribs, your thigh, your forearm, the map of a violent life written on your body, but you're still here, still alive, still wearing the armor, though it's different armor than your grandfather, cheaper, more Germanic in design actually, because half the army's equipment now comes from barbarian workshops, or is copied from barbarian patterns. The eagle's standards still fly. You still call yourself a Roman soldier. But when you look at your century unit of 80 men, you see maybe 20 who were actually born in Roman territory. The rest, Goths, Franks, Alemanni, Sarmatians, men who speak Latin with thick accents, who pray to gods you don't recognize, who fight for Rome because Rome pays better than raiding Rome. Is that wrong? You're not sure anymore. The empire needs soldiers. Citizens don't volunteer like they used. So you take whoever will fight. Your best friend, Fritigern, no relation to the Gothic chieftain, just shares the name that came from beyond the Danube 15 years ago. He's a better soldier than most Romans you've known. He saved your life twice. Does it matter where he was born? Does it matter that his father fought against Rome before his son fought for it? These are questions you think about in the long watches of the night when you're too tired to sleep. Questions nobody asked your grandfather, because in his day the answer was obvious. Now nothing's obvious. The camp outside Adrianople is massive, maybe 60,000 men, though nobody's quite sure. The Emperor Valens himself is here with the Eastern Field Army. There are legions from Syria, Egypt, Thrace, units pulled from every corner of the Eastern Empire. All here because the Goths have risen. Not raiding, not probing. Risen in full rebellion, and they have to be crushed before the situation spirals completely out of control. You remember when the Goths first arrived, just 2 years ago? They came not as invaders, but as refugees, fleeing the Huns, a new terror from the east. Mounted warriors who'd shattered Gothic kingdoms and sent tens of thousands fleeing to the empire's borders. They came begging, asking permission to cross the Danube and settle on Roman land. They promised to be loyal. They promised to serve in the army. They just needed safety, food, and Emperor Valens, in what seemed like wisdom at the time, said yes. Imagine it. An entire people, maybe 200,000 Goths, crossing the river with imperial permission, settling in Thrace, providing recruits for the legions. It was supposed to solve the manpower problem. It was supposed to be brilliant. Except the local officials decided to get rich off desperate people. They charged Goths for food, for supplies, for everything. Sold them dog meat at grain prices. Enslaved their children. Abused their women. Turned what should have been a resettlement into exploitation so vicious that the Goths had no choice but to rebel. And once they rebelled, they were joined by Gothic auxiliaries already serving in the Roman army, by escaped slaves, by discontented locals, by anyone with a grievance against imperial authority. So now you're here, about to fight people who wanted to be Romans, who tried to be Romans, but who Rome failed so completely they had no option but violence. Fritigern, you're Fritigern, not the chieftain who comes to stand beside you on the wall. He's looking at the same horizon, and his face is troubled. My cousin is out there, he says quietly, with the Gothic army. We grew up together. He took service in the auxiliaries 5 years ago, same as me. But when the rebellion started, he made a different choice. And you stayed loyal. I swore an oath to Rome. I meant it. But his voice wavers. Doesn't mean I don't understand why he left. The way our people have been treated since crossing the river, Gaius, it's been shameful. We were promised a partnership, we got slavery. You nod slowly. You've heard the stories. See some of it yourself. Roman officials selling Gothic children for meat. That actually happened. Gothic families starved while grain rotted in warehouses because they couldn't afford the inflated prices. Roman soldiers raping Gothic women with impunity because who would a barbarian complain to? The empire screwed this up, you say. It's dangerous to say aloud, but Fritigern is your friend. We got enemies instead. And now we kill each other, Romans and Goths. When most of the Goths just want what they want, safety, food, a future for their children. The thing is, they didn't want to destroy Rome, they wanted to become one. That's the tragedy nobody talks about. The Gothic refugees weren't invading barbarians bent on destruction. They were people who'd lived on Rome's borders for generations, trading with Roman merchants, serving in Roman armies, adopting Roman ways. They knew what Rome offered: law, order, prosperity, civilization. They wanted in. They wanted to be part of it. And Rome said yes, then betrayed them so thoroughly that violence became their only language. That night, the officers briefed the troops. The Gothic army is nearby, maybe 40,000 warriors, including cavalry. They're dug in on high ground, but Emperor Valens wants to attack before reinforcements arrive from the west. His nephew Gratian, the Western Emperor, is marching with another army, but Valens doesn't want to share the glory, doesn't want to admit he needs help. So tomorrow, in the August heat, you'll march out and engage. You've fought enough battles to know this one feels wrong. The Goths have chosen their ground carefully. Your men are tired from marching. The heat will be brutal. But emperors don't listen to sergeants, and strategy gets decided in imperial tents by men who haven't held a sword in years. That night, you write a letter, not to anyone specific. You have no family left, no wife waiting somewhere. Just a letter to whoever finds it if things go badly. You write about what it means to be a soldier, about serving an empire that's changing so fast you barely recognize it, about fighting people who could have been friends, about the waste of it all. Fritigern finds you writing by lamplight, sits down without asking. For a long time, neither of you speaks. If something happens tomorrow, he says finally, and I fall, will you tell people I died a Roman, that I kept my oath? Nothing's going to happen. Gaius, we both know better. You look at him as this man who was born beyond the frontier, who learned Latin as a second language, who prays to gods you've never heard of, who's been your brother in arms for longer than some blood relatives. You're more Roman than half the men born in Rome. You know that, right? He smiles. But it's sad. I wonder sometimes if Rome even knows what Roman means anymore. When the army's full of barbarians and the emperors are born in Spain or Pannonia or Illyria. When half the empire speaks Greek and the other half barely remembers Latin. When we defend borders that keep shifting. What are we really? What are we fighting for? It's a good question. Maybe. What is Rome now? Not the city that's just one city among many. Not the government that's been reformed and reorganized so many times it's unrecognizable. Not the culture that's been mixed in with Greek and Eastern and Germanic elements for centuries. So what's left? What makes Rome Rome? The idea, you say finally. We're fighting for the idea. That different people can live together under law. That civilization, that order beats chaos. Even when that order is unjust, even when that civilization exploits and enslaves, the empire you serve has done terrible things, is doing terrible. But the alternative is the collapse of all structure, all law, all protection that seems worse. Or maybe you just tell yourself that to justify the violence you've participated in for 20 years. Morning comes too soon. You're roused before dawn, and by the time the sun rises, 60,000 men are forming up for the march to battle. The emperor rides past on a white horse, and men cheer because that's what you do. But the cheering sounds hollow. Everyone's nervous. The Gothic cavalry is legendary. Your own cavalry is adequate at best. This will be decided by infantry, by your ability to hold formation while mounted warriors try to break you. The march takes hours. The August sun beats down mercilessly. You're wearing armor and carrying equipment in heat that has men fainting. Water runs short. The pace is too fast. Someone up front is pushing hard, maybe hoping to catch the Goths unprepared. But they're not unprepared. You see them as you crest a ridge spread across the hillside, organized, waiting. They have the high ground. They have cavalry. They have nothing to lose. This is going to be a disaster. The Gothic leader Fritigern the chieftain, not your friend, sends envoys. I want to negotiate. Your emperor refuses. Another envoy comes. More talk of terms. Your emperor sends him away. Either Valens is determined to fight, or he's being badly advised, or he's too proud to negotiate with barbarians. Whatever the reason, the talking ends and the fighting begins. At first, it went as planned. Your cohort and others advance in formation. Shields locked, javelins ready. The Gothic infantry meets you, and it's the usual brutal work, stabbing, pushing, the smell of blood and sweat and fear. You're a veteran. You know how to stay alive in the crush. You keep your shield up, your sword moving, your mind focused on the man in front of you, and nothing else. Then the Gothic cavalry arrives. You hear them before you see them, thunder of hooves, thousands of horses. They'd been foraging, scattered when the battle started. Now they're back, and they hit the Roman left flank like a hammer. Your own cavalry, outnumbered, outclassed, breaks almost immediately. And suddenly the Gothic riders are rolling up the flank, hitting your infantry from the side, from behind, everywhere at once. The formation holds. For a while. Roman discipline is legendary for a reason. But you're surrounded now, pressed from all sides, no room to maneuver. Men start falling, not one or two, but dozens, then hundreds. The lucky ones die quickly. The unlucky ones go down in the crush and get trampled. suffocating under the weight of bodies. You lose Fritigern in the chaos. One moment he's beside you, fighting with grim determination. The next, there's just a gap where he was telling you, and you're too busy staying alive to find out what happened. Your centurion goes down with a Gothic spear through his throat. Your second-in-command takes a cavalry sword across the face and drops screaming. Command structure collapses. Units fragment. What was a disciplined Roman army becomes a mob of... You fight because that's all you know how to do. You've been a soldier for 20 years. Fighting is automatic parry, thrust, shield bash, step back, assess, engage again. Your body knows the rhythm even as your mind goes numb with exhaustion and horror. Around you, men are dying by the hundreds. The ground is slick with blood. The air tastes like copper and fear. At some point you lose track of time in battle and you realize the emperor is gone. Either fled or fallen, but his standards aren't visible anymore. Without the emperor, without leadership, the army has no center. Men start breaking, running, trying to escape the killing ground, but there's nowhere to go. The Goths have you surrounded. The ones who run just die. You make it to sunset? Don't ask how. Luck, skill, the favor of whatever gods still care about soldiers. You find yourself in a small group of survivors, maybe 30 men from different units, all huddled in a defensive circle, all knowing this is probably where it ends. Your shield is shattered. Your sword is notched in 3 places. You're bleeding from cuts you don't remember receiving. Everyone looks the same, exhausted, terrified, waiting for the final attack. It comes just before dark. Gothic warriors, tired themselves but victorious, moving through the battlefield, finishing the wounded, stripping the dead, looking for Romans still capable of resistance. Your little group fights. What else can you do? Some die immediately. Some fight like demons and take Goth. You're one of the lucky ones. A blow to the head drops you, and you go down hard enough that they think you're dead. You wake to darkness and silence. Well, not silence, moaning. Crying. The sound of thousands of wounded and dying. You're alive somehow. You do an inventory. Head wound, bleeding but not serious. Some of them are still alive, clutching at you, begging for water or help or mercy. You have nothing to give. You just crawl. By dawn, you've made it maybe 2 miles. You find other survivors, a dozen men, all in similar condition. Nobody's in charge. Nobody knows what to do. The Emperor Valens is dead, they say. Fell in the battle, or was burned alive in a farmhouse where he'd taken refuge. 2/3 of the army is dead or captured. The Gothic forces are still on the field, consolidating their victory. This isn't just a defeat, it's a catastrophe. Subscribe to keep learning with me. There are more stories to tell, more moments when history pivoted, when the world changed and nobody quite understood how much until it was too late. But we're not done with this story yet. We need to see where it leads. One of the survivors is a tribune, a junior officer who somehow made it out. He takes charge because someone has to. We make for Constantinople, he says. Report what happened. Regroup. What happened, someone asks. How did we lose? The tribune looks at him with hollow eyes. We lost because we underestimated them. We lost because we thought barbarians couldn't match Roman discipline. We lost because we've been telling ourselves for so long that we're superior that we forgot to actually be superior. You walk for days, a scattered remnant of what was once the Eastern Field Army. You avoid roads where Gothic war parties might be hunting survivors. You beg for food from villages. You steal when you have to. The mighty Roman military, reduced to refugees in its own territory. And as you walk, you think about Fritigern, your Fritigern. You never found his body? Maybe he survived. Maybe he's walking somewhere too, heading home or looking for you or already dead in some ditch. You'll never know. That's war. People vanish. And you carry the not knowing forever. You think about what he said about his cousin who chose the other side, about whether that choice was really wrong. The Goths weren't evil, they weren't savages. They were people pushed to the edge by Roman cruelty and corruption. They fought for survival, for dignity, for the same things Rome supposedly stood for. And they won. They beat Rome in an open battle, killed an emperor, shattered an army. What does that mean for the future? Constantinople is in panic when news of the disaster has preceded you. The streets are full of refugees from Thrace, fleeing the Gothic army that's now roaming freely through imperial territory. The new Emperor Gratian, Valens' nephew, is scrambling to rebuild the army, to defend against the Goths, to prevent complete collapse. But here's what you understand that the emperor doesn't yet. Adrianople wasn't just a military defeat. It was proof that the empire can't control its own territory anymore, can't protect its borders, can't even protect its emperors. The Goths demonstrated that barbarian warriors can beat Roman soldiers. That Roman military supremacy, the foundation of everything, is gone. And once that becomes clear, everything changes. Why would Goths continue to serve in Roman armies if they can defeat those armies? Why would Germanic tribes beyond the Rhine fear Rome if Goths can kill Roman emperors? Why would anyone believe in Roman invincibility when the evidence of Roman vulnerability is right there, written in the blood of 40,000 dead soldiers? Adrianople is the moment when the borders stopped being borders, when inside and outside started to blur, when the empire's monopoly on military force ended. You're living through a hinge point in history, and you can feel it even if you can't articulate it. The world before the battle and the world after aren't the same world. 3 years later, Emperor Theodosius will make peace with the Goths. He'll settle them in Thrace as federated semi-autonomous allies who keep their own leaders and laws but fight for Rome when called. It's a compromise, an admission that Rome can't defeat them or expel them. The first of many such compromises, each eroding imperial authority a little more. 32 years after Adrianople, Goths under Alaric will sack Rome itself, the eternal city, violated for the first time in 800 years. And the Goths doing it will be the descendants and relatives of the refugees who were abused and betrayed in 376. Cause and effect, cruelty and consequence. But that's future history. Right now, you're just a soldier who survived a catastrophe, trying to make sense of what it means. You're 38 years old and you've lost friends and illusions and maybe your faith that the empire you serve is worthy of service. But you're still here, still alive, still wearing what's left of your armor, because what else is there? You're a soldier. That's all you know. And Rome, for all its failures, is still the idea of civilization against chaos, still worth fighting for, even when it disappoints you. Even when it fails its own ideals. Even when you suspect that what you're defending is already dying. You report to the military headquarters, you're debriefed, reassigned, folded back into what's left of the Eastern Army. They give you new equipment, new comrades, a new century to command because all the old ones are dead. Life goes on, after a fashion. The empire endures after a fashion. But everything's different now. The Goths have proven something that can't be unproven. And as word spreads across the empire, other barbarian peoples will learn the lesson. Rome is beatable. Rome is vulnerable. Rome is no longer the invincible master, but just another player in a game where force matters more than law. This is the beginning of the end, though you won't live to see the end. This is the moment when the empire stopped expanding and started defending, when the question changed from how much of the world can Rome conquer to how much of Rome can Rome keep. You'll serve another 10 years before a Gothic arrow finds you in a skirmish on the Danube. You'll die a Roman soldier, faithful to the end. But you'll die knowing that the empire you joined as a boy is already gone, replaced by something more desperate, more compromised, more fragile. And maybe that's all anyone can do. Serve faithfully even as the ground shifts beneath you. Hold to your oaths even when institutions betray them. Keep fighting for an idea even as reality crumbles. It's not glorious. It's not the kind of story that makes good legends, but it's human, and it's true. That's how empires, not in one dramatic moment, but in 1,000 small betrayals and compromises and catastrophes that add up over decades, until one day you look around and realize the world has transformed while you weren't paying attention. Adrianople is just one of those moments. Important, yes. Decisive, maybe. But also just one more step on a long road that leads somewhere nobody chose but everyone helped create. You stand on the walls of Constantinople and you look out at the horizon and you wonder what comes next. You wonder if there's still time to turn this around, to rebuild what was lost, to recover what Adrianople cost. Or if you're just watching the sunset of an empire that's been fading for so long that nobody remembers what noon looked like. The stars come out. They're the same stars that shone on Caesar, on Augustus, on the glory days when Rome seemed eternal. They'll shine on whatever comes after too. That's some comfort, maybe, that the stars endure even when empires don't. Tomorrow, you'll report for duty, because you're a soldier, because someone has to hold the line, because giving up isn't an option, even when victory is impossible. That's the real story of Rome's fall. Not cowards fleeing or traitors betraying, but ordinary people doing their duty in impossible circumstances, holding on as long as they can, adapting and compromising and surviving, until finally there's nothing left to hold on to. But we're not there yet. Not quite. There are still decades to go, still more transformations to witness, still more moments when people like you will stand at the edge of everything and decide whether to step forward or back. For now, though, you're alive. Against all odds, you survived Adrianople. That has to count for even if you're not sure what. The year is 445 CE, and you're kneading bread in what used to be your kitchen. Except you're not sure it's your kitchen anymore because nobody's come to collect taxes in 3 years, and the local magistrate left for Ravenna last spring and never came back, and at some point you stopped being a Roman citizen and became just a person, trying to survive in a world that's forgetting what Rome even means. Your name is Livia, and you're 34 years old, which makes you lucky, because most women don't make it this far. You've buried 2 children, 1 to fever, 1 stillborn, but you have 3 living. 2 sons, 12 and 9. A daughter, 6. Your husband Marcus is out in the field right now trying to coax a harvest from soil that's been worked too hard for too long. You used to have to help hired laborers, seasonal workers from the village. But the village is half empty now, and the people who remain barely feed themselves. The bread dough is coarse, the flour is mixed with ground acorns because grain is expensive and getting more expensive every season. You remember your mother's bread, fine white wheat from Africa, soft and sweet. That was 30 years ago, when the grain ships still came regularly, when markets functioned, when money meant something. Now the African provinces are controlled by vandals. The grain ships don't come at all, and the coins in your small savings box are worthless because nobody trusts the currency anymore. Trade happens through barter now, eggs for cloth, labor for food. The elaborate economic system that made Rome function has collapsed into something medieval. You shape the loaves, 4 of them, because you stretch what you have and set them by the fire to rise. Through the open door, you can see your daughter, little Fabia, playing with a doll made from straw and rags. She's singing to herself. Some song she learned from the Greek woman down the road. Half the words are Greek, half Latin, half something else entirely. The languages are blending, changing, becoming something new. In 2 generations, what people speak in Italy won't quite be Latin anymore. But you don't know that yet. You just hear your daughter's mixed-up song and think it's cute. Your older son, Titus, comes running from the village. He's breathless, excited, frightened. Mother, soldiers are a whole company. Your stomach drops. Soldiers used to mean protection. Now they mean danger. It doesn't matter whose soldiers are Imperial, Gothic, Hunnic, whoever. Soldiers need food, supplies, and they take what they need. The question is whether they'll pay or just take. Whether they'll be disciplined or violent, whether you'll lose supplies or lose everything. How many? Maybe 50. On foot, they look tired. You make a decision. Help me hide the food. Quickly. You've done this before. You have placed a hollow beneath the floor. A space in the roof thatch. The old well that doesn't work anymore but has a ledge where you can stash things. You and Titus work frantically, hiding the best of what you have. The smoked meat, the cheese, the preserved vegetables, the good olive oil. You leave some things visible, old food, poor quality, so the soldiers find something. If they find nothing, they'll tear the place apart looking. Marcus comes in from the field, sees what you're doing, nods approval. He's 42, and he looks 60. Life has been hard. He fought in the army once, 20 years ago, before he was invalided out with a leg injury that still makes him limp. He knows how soldiers think, knows what they're capable of. Take the children to the root cellar, he says, especially Fabia. Stay quiet until I come get you. You want to argue you should face this together, but you understand. Soldiers and young girls are a dangerous combination. You gather your children. It's dark and cold and smells of earth, but it's safe, hidden. Your sons understand immediately. Your daughter starts to complain, but Titus covers her mouth gently, whispers something that calms her. You crouch in the darkness, listening to footsteps above. Have many of them. Voices speaking Latin with accents Gothic maybe, or Hunnic, or just the degraded Latin that passes for military language now. You hear Marcus talking, his voice steady, respectful. Hear furniture moving. Hear them searching. They find the food you left visible. Hear them eating it, talking, laughing. They sound young. They sound human. Just men far from home, doing a job, hungry and tired. But that doesn't mean they're not dangerous. Young, hungry, tired men with weapons are always dangerous. Time stretches. Your daughter shifts against you and you hold her tighter, willing her to stay quiet. Your older son has his hand on a knife. Just a small blade, barely a weapon, but he's ready to use it if needed. He's 12. He shouldn't have to think like this. But this is the world he's grown up in. A world where you hide from your own empire's army. Finally, after what feels like hours, you hear Marcus call down. They're gone. It's safe. You emerge to find your house in disarray. They took the visible food. They took Marcus's good cloak. They took a bronze pan you've had since your wedding. Could have been worse. They could have found the hidden stores. They could have found your daughter. They could have burned the house out of spite. Or this is what gratitude looks like now. Relief that you were merely robbed instead of destroyed. Marcus is sitting at the table, and he looks defeated. They weren't even imperial troops, he says. Foederati, Gothic allies, supposedly on their way north to fight Huns or Burgundians or whoever. Just passing through, taking what they need because nobody pays them properly anymore. Did they say anything about how things are in the Empire? He laughs, but there's no humor in it. What empire? There's an emperor in Ravenna Valentinian III, that weak boy who lets his mother and generals make all the decisions. There's supposedly still a senate in Rome. But here there's nothing. No government, no protection, no law. We're on our own. You wake up one day and realize no one has called you Roman in years. When did that happen? When did you stop being a citizen of Rome and become just a person in a place subject to whoever has the most swords? Your younger son asks the question you're all thinking. Father, why don't we leave? Go somewhere safer? Safer like where? Gaul? The Visigoths control most of it. Spain? The Suevian Vandals. Africa? The Vandals again. Britain? The legions abandoned it 40 years ago. Gods know what's east to Constantinople. Maybe if we could afford passage, if we could get there safely. But this is our land, our home. Where else would we go? He's right, but the answer still feels like giving up. You're trapped not by walls, but by lack of options. Trapped in a world that's collapsing around you while you just try to keep your family fed and safe for one more day, one more season, one more year. The weeks pass. You replant what the soldiers trampled. You make do with less. You teach your daughter to spin wool because that's a skill she'll need. You teach your sons to use weapons, basic stuff, how to hold a spear, how to defend themselves. These aren't lessons you ever imagined teaching. You grew up in a world where law protected you, where soldiers defended you, where being Roman meant something. Your children are growing up in a world where none of that is true. In October, news arrives through a traveling merchant. Rome has been sacked. Again, the Vandals, this time coming from Africa with a fleet, spent 2 weeks methodically looting the city. They took everything gold, silver, artwork, even the copper roof tiles from temples. They took people to captives to sell as slaves. The emperor did nothing. The Senate did nothing. Rome, the eternal city, the heart of civilization, pillaged like any other town. The merchant tells this story like it's gossip, like it's interesting news. He doesn't seem to understand what it means. But you understand. You remember your grandmother talking about when the Visigoths under Alaric sacked Rome 45 years ago. She wept, telling the story, the horror, the shame, the impossibility of it. Rome hadn't been conquered in 800 years, and then it was, and the world seemed to end. Except the world didn't end. Rome rebuilt. The empire continued. Everyone said it was an aberration, a terrible moment that would never happen, and this time, nobody's weeping. Nobody's calling it in. It's just news. Bad news, troubling news, but not world-ending news, because the world has already ended, slowly, over decades, and you've all been living in the aftermath without quite naming it. That night, you and Marcus lie in bed, not touching, both staring at darkness. What are we? You ask quietly. If Rome can be sacked, if emperors can't protect anything, if the legions are just barbarian war bands, if nobody collects taxes or enforces laws, what are we? Survivors, Marcus says. That's all. Just people trying to survive. But our parents were Romans. Our grandparents. We're supposed to be Romans, citizens of the greatest empire in history. Maybe that was always a story we told ourselves. Maybe it was never as true as we believed. You want to argue, but you're too tired, too worn down by years of disappointment and fear and the slow erosion of everything you thought was permanent. Rome isn't something that fell in a day. Rome is something that's been dying for your entire life. So gradually you didn't notice until the death was nearly complete. Winter comes early and harshly. Your stores are adequate, but not. You ration carefully, making sure the children eat first, going hungry yourself some nights. Marcus's leg bothers him more in the cold, the old injury that never properly healed. He can barely work some days, and that means less gets done, less gets prepared for next year. Your neighbor, old Gaius, who served in the legions 30 years ago, died in December, just stops breathing one night. He has no family left, so you and Marcus bury him in the small plot behind his house. No priest, no ceremony, just a body in the ground and a few words mumbled over him. The old Roman rites are mostly forgotten. The Christian priests who replaced them are scarce out here in the countryside. Death has become simple, unadorned, lonely. You take what Gaius had, not much, some tools, seed for spring planting, a few chickens. It's not theft. It's not even really inheritance. It's just practical. If you don't take it, someone else will, and you. This is what morality looks like when everything is collapsing, not rules, just survival calculations. Spring 446 arrives, and you plant. Always plant. Always hope for harvest. Always pretend next year will be better, even though it never is. Your older son is 13 now, strong enough to do a man's work. He helps his father in the field while you manage the household, the garden, the animals. Your daughter is learning quickly how to preserve food, how to mend clothes, and how to be useful. Because usefulness is survival, and beauty or learning or refinement, those are luxuries nobody can afford anymore. In May, a different kind of visitor arrives. A Christian monk, traveling alone, carrying nothing but a staff and a worn sack. He asks for water and a place to sleep. Marcus is suspicious who travels alone these days without protection. But you offer hospitality because that's what decent people do, even now. The monk's name is Brother Paulinus, and he's maybe 50, weathered and thin but with kind eyes. Over dinner, thin soup and hard bread, he tells stories about monasteries forming in the countryside, about communities of believers withdrawing from the chaos to live in prayer and work, about a different way of organizing life, outside the dying Roman system. The empire is finished, he says simply. We all know it, even if we don't say it aloud. But Christ's kingdom endures. The church endures. In the monasteries, we're building something that can communities that don't depend on emperors or legions or tax collectors, just people working together, praying together, preserving what's worth preserving. Preserving like what? You ask. Learning the old knowledge. We copy manuscript scripture, yes, but also Roman literature, Greek philosophy, anything we can save from being lost. Because when the empire finishes its collapse, there will be chaos. Dark ages maybe, but if we preserve the learning, preserve the literacy, preserve the idea that knowledge matters, then someday, when things stabilize, civilization can be rebuilt. Marcus listens skeptically. You really think it's that bad? That the empire will actually end? Brother Paulinus looks at him with something like pity. Friend, the empire ended already. You're just living in its ghost. The western provinces have no effective government. The army is barbarian mercenaries. The economy runs on barter. The cities are half empty. Rome itself has been sacked twice in living memory. What empire? Where? Show me where it still exists, and I'll believe it's not finished. The words hang in the air like smoke. Because he's right. You know he's right. But saying it aloud makes it real in a way that's almost unbearable. Your whole life, your parents' lives, your grandparents' lives, all lived under the assumption that Rome was eternal. That no matter how bad things got, the empire would endure. That being Roman meant something permanent. And now a monk is sitting in your kitchen telling you it's over, that that the future belongs to something else. Monasteries, barbarian kingdoms, whatever comes after. What should we do? You ask quietly. Brother Paulinus smiles. What you're already doing. Survive. Raise your children with love. Teach them to be kind, to be useful, to preserve what's good. The empire provided a framework for life, but it was never the life itself. Life itself is this. Families, communities, people caring for each other. That endures. That survives empires. He leaves the next morning heading east to some monastery you've never heard of. You watch him go and you feel something. Not hope, exactly. But maybe acceptance. Maybe the understanding that empires rise and fall, but people continue. That your great-great-grandchildren won't be Romans, but they'll be something. And maybe that's enough. The summer of 446 is hot and dry. The harvest is poor. You make do. You always make do. Your older son Titus, named for an emperor nobody remembers anymore, asks if he should join the army. There are always recruiters looking for men, promising pay and regular food. You and Marcus say no, absolutely not. The army is a trap now. Unpaid mercenaries who take what they want. Your son will stay with the land, learn farming, and survive the old way. In August, word comes that Attila the Hun, the terror of the East who everyone's been whispering about for years, has invaded Italy. He's burning cities, demanding tribute, threatening Rome itself. The Emperor Valentinian III is apparently negotiating, begging, offering gold and grain to make him go away. There's no talk of defeating him, just appeasing him, bribing him to attack someone else. This is what Rome has become. Not a power that defends, but a victim that pays protection money. Attila eventually leaves. Some say Pope Leo convinced him, some say it was a plague in his army, some say he just got bored. It doesn't matter why. What matters is that a barbarian warlord marched into Italy, threatened the capital, and left when he felt like it. Roman sovereignty is a joke. Roman military might is a memory. Roman pride is ash. You're raising children in the ruins. The sun rises. Crops grow or don't grow. Children laugh and cry. People fall in love, have babies, grow old, die. The grand historical narrative of empire that matters to historians, to emperors, to people writing chronicles. But to you, to your family, to the vast majority of humanity, life is immediate, personal, local. Does it matter that there's no longer an emperor who effectively rules? Not really, because no emperor has helped you in living memory. Does it matter that Rome has been sacked? Not really, because you've never been to Rome and probably never will. Does it matter that the western provinces are fragmenting into barbarian kingdoms? Only insofar as it affects your safety, your ability to trade, your children's futures. This is the reality of collapse. It's not dramatic. It's not armies clashing and cities burning, though those things happen. It's this: slow decay, gradual abandonment, people adapting to the absence of things they once took for granted. Roads not repaired, markets not opening, officials not coming, services not provided, and life continues anyway, because life always continues. Finding new patterns when old ones fail. By 450 CE, your older son is 17. He's courting a girl from the next farm over the daughter of a Gothic settler who came here 10 years ago. You should be troubled by this. Maybe. Romans marrying barbarians. But the truth is, you're relieved. The girl's family is strong, well supplied, protected by kinship networks that reach back to Gothic tribes beyond the frontier. Your son will be safer with them than he would be clinging to Roman identity that means nothing anymore. Identity is shifting like sand. What does it mean to be Roman when the government has collapsed, when the army is foreign, when the language is changing, when the old religion is mostly abandoned, when the laws aren't enforced? At what point do you stop being Roman and become something else? Maybe you already have. Maybe that transition happened years ago and you only just noticed. Maybe your grandchildren will call themselves something different, Italians maybe, or just people of this place, this valley, this land. The Roman part will be ancestry, not identity. A thing grandparents talk about, not a lived reality. Share this if it makes you think. About what we build, what we lose, what survives when everything seems to be ending. These aren't just ancient questions. They ask themselves at every age, to every person watching their world transform into something unrecognizable. Winter 450 arrives and Marcus gets sick. It starts as a cough, becomes pneumonia, settles into his lungs and won't leave. You nurse him as best you can, but medicine is scarce and expensive. The Greek physician who used to visit the valley hasn't been seen in 2 years. You're left with folk remedies, prayers, hope. He doesn't die, but he doesn't recover either. Just gets weaker. At 47, he's become an old man. And you're not far behind 39, worn down by childbirth and work and worry. This is what life does to people when there's no cushion, no safety net, no empire to provide for those who can't provide for themselves. Your sons do the heavy work now. Your daughter manages the household when you're too tired. The family continues because families always continue, adapting, surviving, finding ways forward even when the path is dark. One evening, sitting by the fire, your younger son asks, "Mother, tell me about when you were young, when Rome was still Rome." And you tell him about markets full of goods from across the empire, about feeling safe, about believing the emperor and the legions would, about confidence in tomorrow, in stability, in the permanence of things. He listens, but you can tell he doesn't really understand. To him, your stories sound like fairy tales, like myths about a golden age that maybe never existed, because his lived experience is this chaos, danger, scarcity, the absence of order. That's normal to him. That's just how the world is. And maybe that's the real fall of Rome. Not a date, not a battle, not even a political transition. Just this, the moment when children can't imagine what their parents remember. When the past becomes unbelievable. When the empire becomes... You finish your story, your son thanks you, and goes to bed. You sit by the dying fire, and you think about what was lost and what remains. The empire is gone, or nearly gone. But you're still here. Your children are still here. The land is still here. The rhythms of planting and harvest, of birth and death, of love and loss continue. Empire or no empire, maybe Rome was always just a temporary thing, a structure humans built for a while, used for a while, and then grew beyond. Maybe what you're living through isn't an ending but a transformation. The caterpillar dies so the butterfly can emerge, though you'll never see what that butterfly looks like. Or maybe you're just trying to make sense of loss. Trying to find meaning in trying to believe that your suffering, your fear, your slow grinding down by history serves some purpose beyond itself. The fire goes out, darkness settles. Tomorrow you'll wake and do the work again, because that's all there is. Work and love and survival. The grand narratives of empire, those are for other people to worry about. You have bread to bake, children to raise, a husband to nurse, a life to live in the margins of history. That's how Rome falls. Not in the chronicles or the official histories, but here, in a farmhouse in Italy, as a woman sits alone in darkness wondering when exactly her world ended and why nobody announced it. The answer, of course, is that it's still ending, has been ending, will continue to end. Fall isn't an event. It's a process. And you're living inside it, one day at a time, holding on to what you can and letting go of what you must. That's all anyone can ever do. The year is 476 CE, and you're sweeping the floor of your small shop in Ravenna, and outside someone is shouting that the emperor has been deposed, and you pause mid-sweep and think, which emperor? Because honestly, you've lost track. There have been so many in the last 20 years, each one more forgettable than the last, each one lasting months or sometimes just weeks before being replaced by whoever controls the army this season. Your name is Paulinus, and you're a shopkeeper. I am 43 years old. You sell basic goods, oil, wine, grain when you can get it, pottery, cloth, whatever people need, and you can source. Your shop is near the harbor, which used to be an advantage when Ravenna was a real capital city, when the Western Emperor actually governed from here, when ships came regularly with goods from across what remained of the empire. Now the harbor is half-silted, the ships are fewer, and being near it just means you're near the smell of rotting seaweed and stagnant water. You set down your broom and walk to the door. The man shouting is Decius, a clerk he's running through the street like he's bringing news of a great catastrophe, except he's also sort of laughing, and people are listening with expressions that range from mild interest to complete indifference. Odoacer has deposed Romulus Augustulus. Decius shouts, the emperor is gone. Odoacer is sending the imperial regalia to Constantinople. The Western Empire is finished. You wait for the shock, the horror, the outpouring of grief. It doesn't come. A woman buying vegetables at the stall across from your shop shrugs and continues haggling over the price of onions. An old man sitting on a bench nods slowly, as if this confirms something he already knew. A group of children playing in the street don't even look up. When did this happen? You ask Decius when he reaches your section of the street. This morning. Odoacer's men went to the imperial residence. They gave Romulus Augustulus a choice, to abdicate or die. He abdicated. Smart boy. They're pensioning him off, actually, sending him to live in some villa in Campania with a generous allowance. More than most people get. And Odoacer? Odoacer is declaring himself king of Italy. Says he doesn't need the title of emperor. Says the empire only needs one emperor anyway, and that's Zeno in Constantinople. Very diplomatic, really. He's not claiming to be breaking from Rome, just reorganizing the administration. You absorb that. So here we are, September 476, the day Rome fell, except it didn't. Not really, not in any way that matters to your daily life. Yesterday there was an emperor in Ravenna, a teenage boy with a ridiculously pretentious name, Romulus Augustulus, the little Augustus, a name that combined Rome's founder and its first emperor, as if naming him grandly enough could restore grandeur to the office. Today there's no emperor, just a Germanic general who's calling himself king. And tomorrow you'll open your shop, and people will buy things, and life will continue exactly as it has been continuing through emperor after emperor, crisis after crisis, transformation after transformation. Should we be worried? Someone asks. Will there be fighting? Looting? Decius shakes his head. Odoace has been running things for years anyway. He's the Magister Military. He commanded the army. He chose the emperor. He controlled access to the emperor. The only thing that's changed is he's dropped no more puppet emperors. Just a direct rule. So nothing's different, you say? Well, symbolically, everything's different. The Western Roman Empire, which has existed for, 500 years? Finished. We just witnessed the end of an era. But practically? Decius pauses, considers. Practically? No, probably nothing changes. Odoacer will keep governing. The Senate still meets. The laws still apply. We're still part of the broader Roman world. Constantinople is still the emperor, still the legitimate continuation. We're just under new management. He moves on, spreading his news, and you return to sweeping. The floor is still dirty, the shop still needs tending. The empire can end, but dust accumulates regardless. Your wife, Helena, emerges from the back room where she's been mending clothes. She's heard everything, the walls are thin. So, that's it? She asks. That's how Rome ends? Someone shouts it in the street like they're announcing the fish catch? Apparently. I thought there would be, something more. Armies clashing, fires, drama. The fall of Rome should feel like the fall of Rome. You understand what she means. You were raised on stories of Rome's greatness. Your grandfather fought in the legions under Theodosius, back when there was still glory in that, back when Roman soldiers were Roman and the empire felt permanent. He told you stories about military triumphs, about emperors who commanded respect, about a time when being Roman meant something clear and proud. But that was 50 years ago, maybe more. And in your lifetime, you've seen emperor after emperor, each one weaker than the last. You've seen the empire shrink and fragment. You've watched Vandals take Africa, Visigoths take Spain and Gaul, Burgundians and Franks carve up what's left. You've seen Rome itself sacked not once, but twice. You've lived through the slow, grinding dissolution of everything your grandfather believed was eternal. So when someone announces that the last Western emperor, a boy nobody respected, nobody feared, nobody even particularly noticed, has been deposed by a barbarian general, it doesn't feel like catastrophe. It feels like paperwork, like making official what's been true for decades. The Western Empire. Someone just finally filed the death certificate. I need to go to the forum, Helena says. See if anyone's selling eggs. We're out. Be careful. Just in case. In case of what? A celebration? A riot? Nobody cares enough to riot, Paulinus. That's the problem. Or maybe that's the solution. I don't know anymore. She leaves, and you're alone with your thoughts and your broom. You finish sweeping, then arrange the shop for the day's business. Oil amphoras on one side, cloth on the other, pottery in the middle. Everything orderly, everything normal. Because what else can you? The empire ends, and you still have a living to make. Your first customer is a Gothic soldier. Well, a soldier in service to Odoacer, maybe calling him Gothic is outdated now. He's been in Italy his whole life, speaks Latin without much accent, wears Roman-style clothing with a few Germanic touches. His grandfather was probably a barbarian invader. His grandson will probably be Italian, if that's what they end up calling themselves. The process of assimilation works both ways. Romans becoming barbarized, barbarians becoming Romanized, until the categories stop meaning anything. He buys oil and wine, pays in solid coin. Odoacer's men get paid at least. That's an improvement over the last few imperial regimes where soldiers went months without wages and made up the difference through creative taxation. You heard the news? He asks as you wrap his purchases. About the emperor? Yes, you consider the question. What do you think about the end of the Western Roman Empire? I think, you say carefully, that I've seen a lot of emperors come and go. This one lasted, 10 months? And he was never really emperor anyway, just a boy his father put on the throne. So Odoacer removed him. It's sad, I suppose, symbolically. But practically? I don't know that anything will change. The soldier nods. That's what we're being told. Keep the peace, maintain order, business as usual. Odoaker wants everyone to understand this isn't a revolution, just a transition. From what to what? From pretending the Western Empire still exists to admitting it doesn't. From having a useless emperor to having no emperor. From lies to truth, maybe. It's a reasonable perspective. And as the day wears on, as more customers come and go, you realize that's the common view. Relief, mostly. Relief that the charade is over. Relief that someone's finally being honest about the situation. Relief that, Odoaker, for all that he's a barbarian, is he really? What even makes someone a barbarian anymore? Seems competent and organized and not likely to cause chaos. The Roman Empire ends, and mostly what people feel is relief. Is that tragic? Comics? Just sad? You're not sure. Maybe it's all three. Maybe it's none. Maybe it's just human people adapting to new realities, accepting what they can't change, finding ways to continue, despite the grand historical narratives collapsing around them. Helena returns with eggs. No riots, no chaos. The forum was busy, normal, maybe slightly more crowded than usual as people gathered to discuss the news, but discussing it calmly, rationally, without the hysteria you might expect for the end of civilization as you've known it. I talked to Julia, Helena says, putting the eggs away. You know, the baker's wife. She said her grandmother is furious. Keeps saying this is the worst day in Roman history, that our ancestors are weeping, that we've betrayed everything we are. But Julia just laughed. Said her grandmother has been predicting the worst day in Roman history for 40 years, and somehow life keeps going. The grandmother has a point, though. This is the end of something. Is it, or is it just another step in a process that's been happening our whole lives? When did Rome really fall, Paulinus? When Alaric sacked it in 410? When the Vandals sacked it in 455? When did we lose Africa? When did we lose Britain? When the army became entirely barbarian? Pick any date in the last century, and you can argue that's when Rome really fell. Today is just the day someone made it official. She's right, and you know it. The fall of Rome isn't an event. It's a process. A long, slow process of transformation that's been happening for generations. Your grandfather lived in the Roman Empire. You lived in its fading ghost. Your children, if you had children, which you don't. A source of quiet pain in your marriage, they would live in whatever comes after. Germanic kingdoms, probably. Tribal confederations ruling territories that used to be provinces, but they'd still speak a version of Latin. Still follow Roman law, more or less. Still live in Roman cities, use Roman roads, worship the Christian god that the empire adopted. The form changes. Much of the content remains. At midday, you close the shop. Helena has made porridge, barley and beans, and a little preserved meat, the kind of food your ancestors would have eaten, the kind of food your descendants will eat. Empires rise and fall, but people still need to eat, and they eat what the land provides. Do you feel different? Helena asks as you eat, knowing you're not a Roman citizen anymore, knowing there's no Western emperor. Does it change anything here? She touches her chest, over her heart. You think about it honestly. No, you admit, I still feel like me. I still feel connected to Rome, to the history, to the idea of it. Odoaker taking over doesn't change that. I was Roman yesterday. I'm Roman today. I'll be Roman tomorrow. Politics don't determine my identity. But what are you Roman of? If there's no Rome, the idea of Rome, the language, the law, the culture, those don't disappear just because the Western government collapsed. Constantinople is still Roman. The church is still Roman. The Senate still meets. We still use Roman roads, Roman buildings, Romans. It's all still here. We're living in Rome's ruins, maybe, but we're all Roman enough. Helena smiles sadly. My father used to say something similar. Before he died, I mean. He'd say Rome isn't a place or a government. It's a way of thinking about the world. A commitment to law over chaos, civilization over barbarism, order over entropy. As long as people believe in those things, Rome endures. Do you believe that? I want to. But I also see how things have degraded. How the laws aren't enforced, how order is whatever the local strongman, how civilization is just clinging to old buildings we can't maintain. Maybe Rome endures as an idea, or maybe we're just pretending, the way Emperor Romulus Augustulus was pretending to be emperor when everyone knew he was just a puppet. It's a fair question, one you can't fully answer. Because how do you know when something has truly ended versus just transformed? When does a river become a different river? When is the ship of Theseus no longer the same ship? The afternoon brings more customers and more conversations about the news. Everyone has an opinion. The old are mostly appalled. This is betrayal, disgrace, the death of everything meaningful. The young mostly shrug. What empire? We've never known a functional empire. The middle-aged, your generation, you're split. Some mourn what's lost. Some welcome clarity. Some, like you, just feel numb. Too much has changed too quickly and also too slowly. You've been living through collapse for so long that its official recognition barely registers. An old senator stops by. Well, he calls himself a senator. The Senate still meets in Rome, still claims authority, but authority over what? They don't pass laws that anyone enforces, they don't command armies, they don't control finances. They're a social club of aristocrats pretending relevant, but the pretense matters to them, so you respect it. This is a disaster, the senator, whose name is Cornelius, declares. The end of Roman legitimacy in the West. Barbarian, everything our ancestors built, destroyed. With respect, Senator, you say carefully, because you do need to be careful with aristocrats even if their power is mostly imaginary. Hasn't Odoacer been running things for years? Isn't this just making official what was already true? That's exactly the problem. We'd maintained the fiction, the appearance, the symbolic continuity. Now even that's gone. Now we're openly, admittedly, under barbarian rule. It's humiliating. But practically, damn practically. Rome was never just practical. It was an idea, glory, a claim to civilization itself. And now that claim is dead. You want to up. The senator needs to mourn. Let him mourn. Everyone processes collapse differently. Some adapt, some deny, some grieve. None of it changes the reality. Evening comes. You close the shop, count the day's earnings, modest but adequate, and secure everything for the night. Ravenna is safe enough usually, but you don't take chances. Lock the doors, shutter the windows, keep valuables hidden. Helena is in the back room sewing by lamplight. You sit with her, watching her hands move with practiced skill. She's mending a tunic that's been mended before. Patches on patches, the original fabric barely visible. That's life now, keeping things functioning long past their intended lifespan. Making do. Stretching what you have because getting new is difficult and expensive. I've been thinking, she says without looking up from her work, about what we tell people when they ask what happened to Rome.
What do you mean? Future people?
Generations from now. When they look back at this time and wonder how the mighty Roman Empire fell, what's the story? Barbarian invasions, moral decay, economic collapse, divine punishment? What? You consider this? It's strange to think of yourself as living through a moment that will be studied by historians, but you suppose you are. This is the day the Western Empire officially ended. People will write about it, argue about it, try to understand it. I think, you say slowly, the truth is more complicated than any simple story. Rome didn't fall because of one thing. It fell because of everything. Because it got too big to govern. Because the economy couldn't support the military. Because barbarians weren't really barbarians anymore, but Romans who happened to be born outside the border. Because climate change affected harvests. Because plague killed millions. Because people stopped believing in the old gods, but because the capital moved east and the west became a backwater. Because generals had more power than emperors. Because nobody wanted to fight for an empire that didn't protect them anymore. All of 1,000 small failures adding up to one massive transformation. So there's no simple lesson, no clear morals. The lesson is that nothing lasts forever, that empires, like everything human, are temporary. They rise, they peak, they decline, they transform into something else. Rome's transformation is taking centuries, but it's still a transformation. And maybe what comes after will be better, or at least different. The Goths, and Franks, and Burgundians, and Vandals, they're not destroying civilization. They're building their own kingdoms on Roman foundations, speaking Latin-derived languages, following Roman law, worshipping the Roman god. In a few generations, will they be Romans or something new? Does it matter? Helena sets down her sewing. You're very philosophical tonight. The empire ended. Seems like a good time for philosophy. She laughs, and the sound is warm, human, real. Empires may fall, but laughter continues, love continues. The small, daily acts of kindness and connection that make life bearable, those continue. Maybe that's the real Rome. Not emperors and legions and marble buildings, but this. Two people, sitting together, finding meaning in each other despite the chaos outside. That night, you dream of your grandfather. He's young in the dream, strong, wearing the uniform of a legionary from the old days. He's disappointed in you, angry that you let Rome fall, that you didn't fight harder, that you're accepting barbarian rule without resistance. You try to explain. There was nothing to fight for, no empire worth that name, no way to stop the tide of history. But he won't listen. He just keeps saying, "We were Romans. You're nothing." You wake in darkness, troubled. Are you nothing? Is he right? Have you betrayed everything your ancestors built by accepting what you can't change? Or is acceptance wisdom? Is adaptation survival? Is letting go of what's dead the only way to embrace what lives? You don't. You'll never know. You're just a man in a shop, living through a moment historians will debate for millennia, trying to make sense of transformation you didn't choose and can't control. The next morning, you open the shop. Customers come. You sell goods. Life continues. Odoacer rules Italy. The Senate meets in Rome. The Church continues its work. The Eastern Empire endures in Constantinople. And you, a shopkeeper in Ravenna, sweep your floor and tend your business and survive another day in a world that's simultaneously ending and beginning. What do you think? Did Rome ever really fall, or did it just change? Is there a meaningful difference? Leave a comment if you have thoughts, because these questions don't have easy answers. They never do. History is messy, complicated, and 3 weeks later, word arrives from Constantinople. Emperor Zeno has acknowledged Odoacer as ruler of Italy, has accepted the return of the imperial regalia, has officially recognized that the West no longer needs its own emperor. The political transition is complete, legal, legitimate even. The Roman Empire in the West has ended not with catastrophe but with paperwork, with diplomatic recognition, with everyone agreeing to acknowledge what's been true. And life, as always, continues. Because that's what life does. It continues through empires, through collapses, through transformations so massive they seem to break the world. It continues in shop floors swept clean, in meals shared, in love given and received, in children raised and work done and small kindnesses extended. The empire is dead. Long live whatever comes next. You're Roman. You've always been Roman. You'll die Roman, even if by then the word means something completely different than it did when you were born. That's how Rome falls. Not with thunder, but with whispers. Not with drama, but with acceptance. Not with an ending, but with continuation under a different name. September 476 CE, the day that wasn't, the fall that had already happened. The end was really just a transition. You sweep your floor, you tend your shop, you live your life. Rome endures, or doesn't, or does in ways you can't quite define but can't quite deny. And maybe that's enough. The year is 525 CE, and you're sitting in a scriptorium in southern Gaul, copying a legal text that most people would find unbelievably boring, and you're thinking about how strange it is that you're doing this at all. Because you're not Roman. Not really. Your grandfather wasn't Roman. Your great-grandfather maybe was, though even that's unclear. You live in a kingdom ruled by Franks, pray in a church built by Visigoths, speak a language that's not quite Latin anymore, and yet here you are, preserving Roman law like it's the most important thing in the world. Your name is Gregorius, and you're 28 years old, a monk in a small monastery near what used to be called Massilia when it was Roman, though most people call it by older, simpler names now. You've been copying manuscripts since you were 15. First learning the letters, then the words, then the skill of making each page beautiful, illuminated, worthy of the knowledge it contains. Your hand cramps from work. Your eyes ache from squinting at parchment in candlelight. But you love it. Love being a keeper of knowledge in an age when knowledge is precious and fragile. The text you're copying is from the Theodosian Code, a compilation of Roman laws from nearly a century ago. Most of it is irrelevant now. Laws about imperial succession when there are no regulations for provinces that don't exist anymore. Tax structures for an economy that collapsed. But your abbot insists every word must be copied faithfully, preserved exactly, because someday, maybe not in your lifetime, maybe not in your children's lifetime, but someday people will want to know how Rome governed itself, will want to rebuild civilization on Roman foundations. Will need these words you're painstakingly reproducing. You dip your quill in ink and continue. The words flow onto parchment, concerning the proper conduct of magistrates, concerning the rights of citizens, concerning the administration of justice. Beautiful words, orderly words, words describing a world that doesn't exist anymore. Brother Marcus, working at the desk beside you, is copying Virgil, the Aeneid, that epic poem about Rome's founding, about Aeneas fleeing Troy to establish a new civilization in Italy. It's fiction, of course, but fiction that Romans believed in, that shaped how they saw themselves. Marcus loves the rhythm of the Latin, the heroic grandeur, the sense of destiny. He reads passages aloud sometimes, his voice rising and falling with Virgil's hexameters, and for a moment you can almost feel what it meant to be Roman, to be part of something vast and glorious and eternal. Almost, but not quite, because you weren't part of it. It was already over before you were. Do you ever wonder, Marcus asks, setting down his quill, why do we do this? Why do we spend our lives copying texts from a dead empire? The church isn't dead, you say automatically. Rome continues in Constantinople. You know what I mean. The Western Empire, the Rome of Caesar and Augustus and Marcus Aurelius. That Rome. It's gone, has been gone for 50 years, longer if you count when it really ended versus when they officially admitted it. So why preserve its writings? Who are we preserving them for? It's a fair question, one you've asked yourself many times during long hours of copying. For whoever comes after, you say, for the civilization that will eventually emerge from these dark ages. Dark ages. That's what Abbot Paulinus calls them. Says we're living through a time of darkness between the light of Rome and whatever light comes next. Do you believe that? That it's dark now? You look around the scriptorium. Afternoon sun streams through the window, real glass, Roman glass, from a workshop that somehow still functions. The room smells of parchment and ink and beeswax candles. 6 monks are working at their desks, all copying different texts, legal codes, classical literature, Christian scripture, medical treatises, agricultural manuals, everything worth saving from the old world. It's not dark here, you say. Here we have light, knowledge, order, purpose. But out there, you gesture vaguely toward the world beyond the monastery. Yes, it's darker than it was. Literacy is rare, trade is limited, cities are shadows of what they were, the roads crumble, the aqueducts break, knowledge is being lost faster than we can preserve it. And yet people seem happy enough. The Frankish kingdom is stable. There's peace mostly. Food is adequate. Is it really so dark? Or is it just different from what Romans considered civilization? You don't have a good answer. Because he's right, the common people aren't suffering more than they did under late Roman rule. Probably less, actually. Taxes are lower. Local warlords provide protection. The church offers community. Life continues. And for most people, life was always hard regardless of whether they called themselves Roman or Frankish or anything else. But something is being lost. You feel it every time you copy a text and realize you're one of maybe 20 people in the entire region who can read it. Every time you encounter a word you don't understand because the knowledge it refers to no longer exists. Every time you see a Roman building slowly collapsing because no one remembers how to maintain it. Echoes and legacies. That's what you're preserving. Echoes of a civilization that once mastered engineering, law, literature, governance on a scale the world had never seen. Legacies that survived the collapse. Some of them, at least. Not everything. Never everything. But enough, you hope, to matter. In the monastery's library, small by Roman standards, magnificent by current ones, you have maybe 200 manuscripts. Bibles, yes, but also Cicero and Seneca and Pliny. Christian theology from Augustine and Jerome, but also pre-Christian philosophy from the Greeks. Medical texts describing surgical procedures no one can perform anymore. Architectural treatises explaining how to build structures no one builds anymore. Agricultural advice that's actually useful. Poetry that's actually beautiful. And legal codes. So many legal codes. Because Roman law was the empire's greatest achievement. Maybe. The law. The idea that disputes could be resolved through reason, that everyone, regardless of birth, had certain rights. That governance could be systematic, predictable, just. Well, theoretically just. The reality was often corrupt, arbitrary, but the theory, the aspiration that was revolutionary. And it's in the Frankish kingdoms, and the Gothic kingdoms, and even among the Vandals, Roman law continued. Modified, simplified, blended with Germanic customs, but recognizable. The Christian Church adopted Roman administrative structures wholesale, Latin transformed, evolving, but still Latin at its core, remained the language of learning and law. Rome died, but didn't die. Transformed, but didn't vanish. That's what you're documenting with every manuscript you copy. Evening prayer interrupts your work. You set down your quill carefully, never leave ink to dry on the nib, and follow the other monks to the chapel. The service is in Latin, though a Latin the Romans would have found strange. Simplified grammar, different pronunciation, loan words from Germanic languages. But it's still Latin, still connecting you to Rome through language, through liturgy, through the continuous tradition of the Church that began in Rome and spread across the empire and outlasted the empire's collapse. After prayer, dinner in the refectory, simple food, bread, cheese, vegetable stew, watered wine. You eat in silence per monastic rule, but your mind is loud with thoughts. Thoughts about what Rome means now, what it meant then, what the difference is. Your abbot, Paulinus elderly now, bent with age but sharp-minded, sometimes tells stories about his youth. He was born around 465 CE, just before the so-called fall. He remembers when there was still a Western emperor, though even then everyone knew it was fiction. He remembers the transition to Odoacer's rule, then to Theodoric the Ostrogoth, then to the current patchwork of kingdoms. He's lived through the entire collapse and transformation, and he insists on calling himself Roman even though he spent his entire adult life under Gothic and Frankish rule. Rome, he told you once, isn't a place or a government. It's a flame. The empire was just one torch carrying that flame. When that torch burned out, the flame transferred to new torches. The church, the monasteries, the kingdoms that rose from imperial ruins. The flame changes color, changes intensity, but it doesn't go out. Not if we don't let it. Beautiful metaphor. You're not entirely sure it's true. Flames do go out. Knowledge does get lost. The Dark Ages, if that's what these are, the manuscripts you're copying might be burned by raiders, lost to flood or fire, simply discarded when no one can read them anymore. There's no guarantee that civilization will return, that the knowledge you're preserving will ever be valued again. But you copy anyway. Because what else can you do? You're a monk. This is your calling. And if there's even a chance that your work matters, that some scholar centuries from now will pick up a manuscript you copied and learn something valuable, understand something important, feel connected to the long chain of human knowledge, then it's worth it. Worth the cramped hand and aching eyes and years of tedious labor. After dinner, you have free time before evening prayers. You walk the monastery grounds, breathing cool air, stretching legs that have been folded under you all day. The monastery is built on the ruins of a Roman villa. You can still see mosaic floors in some rooms, fading frescoes on some walls. The abbot deliberately chose this site because of its history. We build on Roman foundations, he says, literally and metaphorically. Brother Thomas joins you in your walk. He's older, 40-something, and has been a monk since childhood. Unlike you and Marcus, who chose this life as adults, Thomas was given to the monastery as a child. His parents were too poor to feed him. The monastery took him, raised him, educated him, saved his life, probably. He's grateful, but there's also sadness in him. The sense of what was lost in family, worldly experience, the possibility of a different life. What are you working on? He asks. Theodosian Code. Legal text from the 5th century. Useful? Not. Most of it describes governmental structures that don't exist anymore. But the principles are interesting. How to balance authority and justice. How to govern fairly. How to create laws that apply equally to everyone. Do they, though, apply equally? They're supposed to. The ideal is equal treatment under law, regardless of birth or status. The reality was always messier, but the ideal matters. It's what we're supposed to aim for. Thomas nods slowly. My father was a slave. Did I tell you that? Not me. I was born free, but my father was enslaved by Romans when he was a child. Captured in some raid on Germanic territories. Brought south, sold, worked until he earned his freedom. He never spoke well of Rome. Said for people like him, Roman law meant nothing. Roman justice was a lie. The equality you're copying about he never saw. You're quiet, because he's right. Roman civilization, for all its achievements, was built on slavery and exploitation. Millions of people lived and died in bondage, and Roman law mostly protected their owners, not them. The equality you're preserving was equality among citizens, and many residents of the empire weren't citizens, weren't even considered fully human. I'm sorry, you say inadequately. Don't be sorry. Just remember it wasn't all glory and grandeur. For every senator quoting Cicero, there were 1,000 slaves growing the grain he ate. For every beautiful villa, there were 100 hovels. Rome was great, yes, but also maybe it needed to fall. And what replaced it? Is it better? Thomas considers. The Germanic kingdoms have slavery too, but less of it. The church preaches that all souls are equal before God, even if all bodies aren't equal before kings. There's less urban sophistication, but more rural stability. Less literature, but more community. I don't know if it's better, but it's not worse. Just different. You walk in silence for a while. The sun is setting, painting the sky in shades of orange and purple that would have inspired Roman poets. Beauty doesn't end when empires do. The natural world continues regardless of human politics. Why do you copy the manuscripts? Thomas asks. Really, not the official answer about preserving knowledge. The real reason. What drives you to spend your life doing this? You think carefully before answering. Because, you say slowly, I want to believe that what humans build matters. That knowledge and beauty and wisdom don't just disappear when civilizations collapse. That we're part of a chain, a tradition, something larger than our individual lives. Rome created things worth preserving, not just material things, but ideas, ways of thinking, approaches to problems. If we don't preserve them, they're lost forever. But if we do preserve them, then maybe someone, someday, will use them to build something new, something better even. So you're doing it for the future. For the future and for the past. For the Romans who created this knowledge and the people who will use it. And maybe for myself too. Because this work gives my life meaning, makes me part of something that matters. Thomas smiles. That's a good answer. Better than mine would be. I copy manuscripts because Abbot Paulinus tells me to. And I've taken a vow of obedience. Your reason is better. But you're not sure it is. Because Thomas's simple obedience, his faithful execution of assigned tasks is also noble, also valuable. The world needs both people who think deeply about meaning and people who just do the work. Maybe the combination is what allows knowledge to survive. The philosophers who understand why it matters, and the craftsmen who actually preserve it. Night falls. The monastery bell rings for evening prayers. You return to the chapel and sing the psalms in Latin that's 500 years old, words that connected you to Rome and Jerusalem, and to the vast sweep of history. After prayers, you return to your small cell, a room barely larger than a bed, and you light a candle, and you read. Tonight you're reading Augustine, The City of God, his massive work, written as Rome was collapsing, trying to make sense of catastrophe. Augustine argued that earthly cities, Rome included, are temporary, that the only eternal city is the city of God, the spiritual realm that transcends politics and empires. Rome fell, he said, but the church endures. Earthly power is fleeting, but spiritual truth is eternal. It's comforting theology when your world is ending. Maybe that's why Christianity spread so successfully during Rome's collapse. It offered meaning beyond empire, hope beyond earthly circumstances. Your civilization is crumbling, that's fine. Your true citizenship is heavenly anyway. You're not sure you believe it, you value earthly things too much. Books and learning and the beauty of well-crafted arguments. But Augustine has a point. Empires fall. All of them, eventually. Rome fell. Persia will fall. The Frankish kingdoms will fall. Everything human is temporary, but ideas might be eternal, or at least longer lived than the civilizations that birthed them. The Greek idea of philosophy. The Christian idea of universal human dignity. These ideas survived their origin civilizations and spread into new contexts, new cultures, new expressions. Maybe that's what you're really preserving. Not Rome itself, but the ideas Rome carried. The flame, as Abbot Paulinus said, let the torch change hands. The flame continues. You blow out your candle and lie in darkness, thinking about echoes. Rome echoes in the Latin you speak, in the law codes governing Frankish kingdoms, in the architectural principles still used for building churches, in the agricultural techniques farmers employ, in the literary forms poets imitate, in the administrative structures in the very concept of a universal empire that will inspire rulers for the next 1,000 years. The Byzantine Empire in Constantinople calls itself Roman, and will continue calling itself Roman for another 9 centuries. The Pope in Rome claims authority as heir to Roman imperial power. Germanic kings styled themselves as Roman successors. For the next millennium, every major European power will try to claim Rome's legacy, the Holy Roman Empire, most obviously, but others too. The very idea of Europe as a unified civilization springs from Rome's example. Rome fell. Rome endures. Both things are true. The Western Empire collapsed in the late 5th. The idea of Rome law, language, culture, Christianity, the aspiration to universal civilization that lived on, adapted, evolved, shaped the entire medieval world and beyond. You're preserving the seeds, writing them down carefully, storing them safely, hoping someone will plant them again someday. Maybe they will. Maybe in centuries to come, scholars will rediscover these texts, study them, and use them to rebuild something resembling classical civilization. The Renaissance, they might call it, a rebirth. Rome rising from its own ashes. Or maybe not. Maybe the Dark Ages will darken further. Maybe knowledge will be lost despite your efforts. Maybe the future belongs to illiterate warlords who value strength over wisdom, conquest over culture, violence over law. You don't know. Can't know. You're just a monk with a quill, copying words, preserving echoes, keeping the flame alive for however long you can. That's enough. It has to be enough. Subscribe for more stories like this, about things that end and things that continue, about what we lose and what we keep, about the long, slow process of civilization, how it rises, how it falls, how it transforms into something new. Morning comes. You wait before dawn for morning prayers, then breakfast, then back to the scriptorium, back to your desk and your parchment and your quill, back to copying the Theodosian Code, word by tedious word, preserving laws for courts that don't exist, in the hope that someday, somewhere, someone will need them again. Brother Marcus is already working when you arrive. He's nearly finished with the Aeneid months of labor almost complete. He's radiating satisfaction at the nearly finished task. When you're done, you ask, what will you copy next? Maybe Lucretius. De rerum natura. About the nature of things. Pre-Christian, pagan philosophy, but beautiful and scientifically interesting. He understood atoms, evolution, so many things that got lost and had to be rediscovered. Will Abbot Paulinus approve? Pagan text? Marcus shrugs. He approved Virgil, approved Cicero and Seneca. He understands that Roman wisdom isn't only Christian wisdom, that we preserve the whole tradition, not just the parts that fit our current beliefs. That's what makes us different from the barbarians. We value knowledge even when we disagree with it. It's true. The monastery preserves pre-Christian texts alongside Christian ones, classical philosophy alongside scripture, medical knowledge alongside theology, everything worth knowing, regardless of source. Because knowledge itself is valuable. Understanding the world is valuable. Being connected to the long tradition of human inquiry is valuable. That's Rome's legacy too. The idea that knowledge matters, that learning is valuable. That civilization means more than just survival, it means culture, philosophy, art, science, literature, the full expression of human capability. You sit at your desk, you dip your quill, you write. The words flow onto parchment. Roman law, Roman wisdom, Roman achievement. Preserved by non-Roman hands in a non-Roman age, for a future you'll never see. Empires don't die, they echo. And you are a monk in southern Gaul, 50 years after the fall, speaking a language that's no longer Latin but isn't yet French. You're one of those echoes, carrying Rome forward, keeping it alive, ensuring that something of what was built survives the catastrophe. That's all anyone can do. Carry the flame. Pass it forward. Trust that someone, sometime, will value what you've preserved. The sun rises higher, the scriptorium fills with light, 6 monks copying 6 different texts, 6 threads connecting past to future, 6 echoes of Rome, and all around you, though you can't see it yet, though you won't live to see it, the seeds you're planting are taking root. The manuscripts you copy will survive, will be copied again by future, will be studied by Renaissance scholars, will inspire enlightenment, will shape legal codes and constitutions and the entire Western intellectual tradition. Rome fell, but Rome lives. In every Romance language descended from Latin, in every legal system based on Roman law, in every government claiming to serve justice equally, in every university teaching classical texts, in every person who believes that civilization means law rather than arbitrary power, reason rather than force, culture rather than barbarism. Rome lives. And you, Gregorius, monk and scribe, copying texts in a crumbling world, you're the reason why. You and thousands like you, keeping the flame alive through the darkness, preserving what matters until the world is ready to value it again. That's the real fall of Rome. Not the end, but the transformation. Not death, but metamorphosis. The caterpillar dies so the butterfly can emerge. You just have to trust that the butterfly will be beautiful. You write. The words flow. The legacy continues. Rome endures. The sun is setting again over the Forum, and you're walking home through the same streets, past the same crumbling columns, under the same indifferent stars. It's never the same. You're older now. The stones are older. The world has turned and nothing stops it turning. You're tired. Not the tiredness that sleep fixes, but the deep tiredness that comes from watching things end slowly. From knowing that everything you were promised, the eternal empire, the Roman peace, the certainty of tomorrow, was always a story people told themselves to sleep at night, and now even the story is fading. But here's what you've learned. Walking through these centuries with me, witnessing the long goodbye, Rome didn't fall the way they told you it would. There was no single catastrophic moment when trumpets sounded and walls crumbled and darkness descended. There was just this. Days becoming weeks, becoming years, becoming decades, becoming centuries, and people living through it all. Making bread and raising children and falling in love and burying parents and working fields and arguing about the same things people always argue about. The vegetable seller's corner is empty again tonight. You don't even remember her name anymore, but you remember that she was there once, and now she isn't. And that's how things end. Not with drama, but with absence. The slow accumulation of empty spaces where life used to be. You think about the farmer in the 3rd century crisis, watching smoke rise from his neighbor's farm. About the clerk in Nicomedia drowning in paperwork that might save an empire, or might just be busy work. About the merchant's daughter in Antioch, caught between her father's dying gods and her own emerging faith. About the soldier at Adrianople, learning that Roman invincibility was always a lie. About the woman hiding her children from soldiers who were supposed to protect them. About the shopkeeper in Ravenna, on the day the empire officially ended, sweeping his floor because what else could he do? About the monk, copying manuscripts, preserving echoes for a future he'd never see. All of them are Roman. All of them are living through the fall. All of them are just trying to survive with dignity and love, and not a single disaster, but 1,000 small human moments, stretched across centuries, adding up to a transformation so massive that people living through it could barely comprehend it. And here's what's strange. Rome never really died. Not completely. Parts of it died, yes. The Western Empire collapsed. The legions disbanded. The frontiers dissolved. The economy contracted. The cities shrank. Latin fractured into daughter languages. The old certainties evaporated like morning dew. But the idea of that lived. That lives still. You can trace it through history like a thread through fabric. The Byzantine Empire called itself Roman for another 1,000 years. The Holy Roman Empire claimed that legacy. The Catholic Church Romance languages, carrying Latin forward. Legal systems built on Roman law. Architecture imitating Roman forms. Literature echoing Roman themes. The very concept of universal empire, of civilization as a project spanning peoples and territories, that came from Rome and never died. Every time someone says innocent until proven guilty, that's Rome. Every time a government claims to serve law rather than the whim of a ruler, that's Rome. Every time someone studies Virgil or Seneca or Marcus Aurelius, that's Rome. Every time a lawyer cites precedent, a senator debates policy, a citizen demands their rights, that's Rome, echoing forward through the centuries. So did Rome fall? Yes and no. The structure fell. The idea transformed. The empire ended. The legacy continued. Both things are true. History doesn't deal in simple narratives, only in complicated, contradictory, deeply human truths. You reach your door. The same door from the beginning, though older now, like everything. Like you stand there for a moment, hand on the latch, looking back at the Forum one more time. The columns are darker in the twilight. The empty spaces are more visible. The decay is more obvious. But there's also lamplight in the windows. There's smoke from cooking fires. There are voices, children playing somewhere, their laughter carrying through the evening air. There's life. There's continuity. There's tomorrow, however uncertain it might be. You think about all the people who stood where you're standing over the centuries, Romans who believed their empire would last forever, Romans who watched it crumble and wondered what it meant. Romans who adapted, who survived, who passed something forward even as they lost so much. You think about the people who will stand here in the future? Maybe they'll call, maybe something else entirely. Maybe they'll remember Rome, maybe they won't. But they'll stand on these stones, walk these streets, live in the long shadow of the empire whether they know it or not. Because that's what empires leave behind. Not just ruins, though those too, but patterns, templates. Ideas about how humans can organize themselves, govern themselves, understand themselves. Some of those ideas are good, some are terrible. All of them persist, shaping the world long after the empire that birthed them has vanished. Rome fell the way all things fall, slowly, then all at once, then not at all. Slowly through the crisis years, the invasions, the economic collapse, the political fragmentation, all at once in moments like Adrianople or the sack of Rome or the deposition of the last emperor, not at all, because the idea, the legacy, the echo, that never stopped reverberating. You're part of that echo. Everyone is. The entire Western world was shaped by Rome's rise and Rome's fall. The languages you speak, the laws you follow, the governments you live under, the very concept of Europe as a civilization, all of it traces back to Rome. Not just to Rome's achievements, but to Rome's collapse, to the transformation that followed, to the medieval kingdoms that rose from imperial ruins and eventually became modern nations. History isn't a story with clear beginnings and endings. It's a river, constantly flowing, constantly changing, carrying forward elements from everything that came before. Rome isn't a dead civilization you study in books. It's a living tradition you participate in every day, whether you realize it or not. You open your door, step inside, close out the darkening forum and the empty streets and the weight of history that's too heavy for any one person to carry. Tomorrow, you'll wake. The sun will rise. You'll go to the market again if there is one, or you'll make do if there isn't. You'll continue because that's what humans do. We continue. Through empires, through collapses, through transformations so massive they seem to break the world. We continue, adapting, surviving, finding meaning in the small things even when the big things fall apart. That's the secret they don't teach you. The secret of Rome's fall reveals empires are temporary, governments are temporary, even civilizations are temporary. But humanity continues, love continues, work continues. The daily acts of kindness and creation and connection that make life bearable, those continue regardless of what emperors do or don't do, what empires rise or fall. Maybe Rome's fall isn't a tragedy, maybe it's just a chapter. One story ending so another can begin. The Western Empire collapsed, and from its ruins came new kingdoms, new cultures, new possibilities. Would the Renaissance have happened without Rome's fall? Would modern Europe exist? Would you exist? Would you exist with your particular mix of ancestries and influences and ideas? Everything that ends makes space for something new. Every fall is also a transformation. Every death contains a Rome died. Rome lives. Both things are true. And you standing in your doorway, tired from the long walk through centuries, heavy with the weight of witnessing so much loss, you're part of both. The dying and the living. The ending and the continuation. The fall and the echo. Rest well, friend. You've traveled far tonight. Through the 3rd century crisis and Diocletian's desperate reforms, through Constantine's Christian revolution and the pressure of barbarian migrations, through Adrianople's catastrophe and the slow fade of daily life, through the day that wasn't really a day, when the empire officially ended, but life continued, through the monks preserving echoes and the long transformation that followed. You've seen how empires really fall. Not with thunder, but with exhaustion. Not with drama, but with adaptation. Not with an ending, but with a slow metamorphosis into something unrecognizable. And maybe that's the most important lesson. Nothing truly ends. Everything transforms. Rome fell into the Middle Ages. The Middle Ages fell into the Renaissance. The Renaissance fell into the modern era. Each ending is also each fall is also a rise. The river flows on, carrying forward what matters, leaving behind what doesn't, constantly renewing itself. You're tired. It's been a long journey, but you've learned something valuable, haven't you? That history isn't about dates and battles and famous names. It's about people, ordinary people, living through extraordinary times, trying to make sense of changes they didn't choose and couldn't control. People like you, like all of us. Rome's fall is your fall too. Not because you're Roman. You're not. Not really. Not anyone. But because you're human. And humans live in empires that rise and fall, in certainties that crumble, in worlds that transform beneath our feet. What happened to Rome happens to everyone, eventually. Everything you think is permanent will prove temporary. Everything you trust will eventually fail. Everything you build will someday crumble. But that's not despair. That's just the truth. And there's freedom in that truth. If nothing lasts forever, then you're free to love what exists now without demanding it be eternal. Free to build without expecting permanence. Free to participate in the ongoing human project knowing your part is temporary but still meaningful. Rome fell. You'll fall too someday. Everyone does. But between now and then, there's life to live, bread to bake, children to raise, work to do, love to give. Small acts of kindness that ripple forward through time in ways you'll never see. That's what endures. Not empires. Not governments. Not even civilizations, but the ongoing conversation of humanity with itself. The passing forward of knowledge, wisdom, compassion, hope. Each generation receives from the last, adding what they can, passing it to the next. You received Rome's legacy, its language, its law, its ideas about civilization. What will you pass forward? What echo will you add to the endless reverb? The stars are out now, the same stars that shone on Romulus and Remus, on Caesar and Augustus. On the farmer in the crisis, and the soldier at Adrianople, and the shopkeeper in Ravenna, and the monk in his scriptorium. The same stars that will shine on your great-great-grandchildren, who will face their own empires rising and falling, their own certainties crumbling, their own transformations too massive to comprehend. The stars don't care about empires. They shine on everything equally, the glorious and the ruined, the powerful and the powerless, the empires and the echoes. They remind you that you're part of something larger than politics, larger than civilization, larger than Rome or any empire. You're part of the human story which is older than Rome and will outlast whatever comes after. Rest well, friend. Until next time. Close your eyes. Let the weight of history settle into the background. Let the questions about empires and their endings drift away like smoke. You don't need to solve the mystery of Rome's fall tonight. You don't need to understand transformation or decode the patterns of history. You just need to rest. The forum will still be there tomorrow. The stones will still, the empire will still be gone, and you'll still be here, continuing, surviving, finding your way through whatever comes next. That's enough. That's always enough. Rest now. Let the long goodbye complete itself. Let Rome fade into memory and echo and legacy. Let yourself fade too, into sleep, into dreams, into the peaceful darkness where empires don't matter, and history is just a story someone tells while you drift away. The fall is over, the transformation continues. And you're part of it all. The ending and the beginning, the death and the birth, the fall and the eternal echo that never quite fades to silence. Sleep well. Dream of marble columns and wheat fields and ordinary people living through extraordinary times. Dream of continuity despite collapse, of love despite loss, of hope despite everything. Dream of Rome, falling forever, and never quite hitting the ground. Just rest. Until next time, friend. Until the next story. Until the next long walk through history's ruins, finding beauty in decay and meaning in transformation. Rest well. The empire has fallen. The echo endures. And so do you.